Orpheus, the son of Apollo, the god of music, and Calliope, the muse of epic poetry, was destined to become one of the most renowned figures in Greek mythology. His gift for music was unparalleled, with the power to enchant not only humans, but also animals, trees, and even the gods themselves. Orpheus played the lyre with such grace that it could soothe the hearts of those who heard it, transforming the world around him into a place of beauty and tranquility. But Orpheus's story is not just one of great talent. It is a tale of love, loss, and the eternal struggle between life and death. His love for Eurydice, a beautiful nymph, was as deep as the river Styx, yet tragedy would follow him every step of the way. Despite the love that filled his heart, Orpheus's journey would be marked by sorrow and longing, his music becoming a reflection of the pain that coursed through his soul. Join me now as we begin the serene journey through Orpheus's myth, from his birth to his legacy, from his joy to his sorrow, his music forever echoing through the ages. Please, like, subscribe, and share where you are listening from, and let us begin the peaceful tale of Orpheus. Orpheus was born to Apollo, the radiant god of music and light, and Calliope, the most esteemed of the muses, who presided over epic poetry and eloquence. The union of these two divine beings heralded the arrival of a son destined for greatness. Orpheus, even as an infant, was said to have a natural connection to the world of sound. The moment he first cried, it was not just a wail, but a melodious note, soft and beautiful, which caught the attention of the gods. Apollo, proud of his son's early display of musicality, took him under his wing. As a father who commanded the lyre himself, Apollo taught Orpheus to play the instrument with great care. Calliope, too, passed on her wisdom, inspiring him with the power of language and rhythm. By the time Orpheus was a young child, it was clear to all who listened that he was gifted beyond measure. His music had the ability to charm even the most indifferent of souls, turning the hearts of gods and mortals alike. In the fertile lands of Thrace, Orpheus's talents grew renowned. It was said that the very earth responded to his music. Trees would sway as if dancing to his songs, and rivers would slow, mesmerized by the melodies that filled the air. Animals, from the wildest beasts to the smallest creatures, would gather to listen, their once unruly natures subdued by the gentle strains of Orpheus's lyre. His music had the power to heal, to soothe, and to bring harmony to the world around him. Yet, the gods were not the only ones to be captivated by Orpheus's gift. As he grew older, he became a symbol of beauty and grace, admired by mortals as well. His reputation spread far and wide, and soon his music reached even the ears of the nymphs who roamed the forests and streams. Among them was Eurydice, a nymph of remarkable beauty, whose heart was as pure as the melodies Orpheus played. Their meeting was one of fate. Eurydice, drawn to Orpheus by the sound of his music, approached him one day in the forest. She had heard whispers of his skill, but to hear the lyre played in person was a transformative experience. As Orpheus played, Eurydice stood in awe, the beauty of the music weaving through her soul, pulling her closer to him. Orpheus, sensing her presence, turned to see her standing there. Their eyes met, and in that instant the world seemed to stand still. It was as though the harmony of the universe had settled into place, as though their destinies were intertwined in a cosmic song. Their love blossomed swiftly, as natural and inevitable as the changing seasons. Orpheus and Eurydice were united by their shared understanding of beauty and harmony. Orpheus, in his music, found in Eurydice the muse he had long sought. Eurydice, in turn, found in Orpheus a soul whose music mirrored the purest parts of her own heart. Their love was simple and pure, untouched by the harshness of the world, existing in the tender melodies that Orpheus created. But as with all stories of great love, there is often a shadow that looms, a darkness that threatens to disrupt the harmony. For Orpheus, this shadow would soon make its presence felt in a way that would alter the course of his life forever. Before the world could fully understand their union, a tragic turn awaited. Eurydice, while walking through a meadow one afternoon, was bitten by a serpent hidden in the grass. The venom was swift, and Eurydice's life was taken from her in an instant. Orpheus, heartbroken and inconsolable, could not bear the thought of living without her. He wandered through the forests, playing his lyre with a grief so deep that it resonated through the earth itself. His music, once filled with joy, was now a mournful cry for the love he had lost. The gods, hearing the sorrow in Orpheus's melodies, knew that he could not remain in such despair. His music, though filled with sadness, was a bridge between the realms of the living and the dead. It was then that the gods began to take notice, and they saw that Orpheus was not simply grieving for his lost love. He was struggling with a question as old as time itself, whether it was possible for love to overcome even the greatest of boundaries. Driven by his sorrow and his undying love for Eurydice, Orpheus made the fateful decision to descend into the realm of the dead. He would journey to the underworld itself, to the dark kingdom ruled by Hades, in the hopes of reclaiming his beloved. It was a daring and dangerous path, but for Orpheus there was no other choice. His heart, torn by loss, would lead him into the depths of the earth. As he began his journey, Orpheus played his lyre one final time, sending the notes of his song echoing through the land. The music carried the weight of his heartache, each note laced with a sorrow that transcended words. It was said that the winds, the trees, and even the stars wept as Orpheus passed beneath them. His music was a reflection of his soul, raw and vulnerable, filled with the deepest of sorrows. This was the beginning of Orpheus's tragic and heroic journey, a journey that would take him to places both beyond the living world and into the very depths of existence itself. Orpheus's heart was heavy with grief as he journeyed towards the realm of the dead, a place where no living soul had ever returned unscathed. The path before him was fraught with danger, the air thick with the chill of the afterlife. Yet Orpheus moved forward, his determination unwavering. His love for Eurydice was the sole guide that led him into the depths of the earth, a place where darkness reigned and hope seemed a distant memory. As he descended, Orpheus's music continued to play, a melody that was both beautiful and sorrowful, a reflection of his anguish. The sound of his lyre seemed to echo through the dark corridors of the underworld, carrying his pleas to the gods of death. His music had always held the power to calm the hearts of those who heard it. But in this land of shadows and sorrow, it was something even more potent. It was a beacon of life, a fragile thread of hope in a world where such things were scarce. The first beings Orpheus encountered were the spirits of the dead, who, though bound by the rules of the underworld, were moved by the sweetness of his music. The souls of the departed, once trapped in eternal silence, could now hear the melody that filled the air. They wept as they listened, for in Orpheus's song they heard the sorrow of the living, a sorrow that transcended death itself. even the most hardened souls, those condemned to an eternity of punishment, found solace in his music. As Orpheus ventured deeper into the underworld, he passed the river Styx, the dark boundary that separated the realm of the living from the domain of the dead. Here, he encountered Charon, the ferryman who carried the souls of the departed across the river. Charon, grim and unyielding, paused for a moment as Orpheus approached. The ferryman had seen countless souls pass him by, but never before had he heard such music. Orpheus's lyre played with such grace that even Charon, who had long since lost all hope, felt a flicker of emotion stir within him. With a solemn nod, Charon agreed to ferry Orpheus across the river Styx, allowing him to continue his journey. The boat creaked as it moved through the black waters, the sound of Orpheus's music drifting in the air. It was said that the very waters of the Styx were calmed by the sound, and even the winds seemed to cease, as if holding their breath. Orpheus's music had reached the deepest corners of the underworld, and all who heard it were momentarily lifted from their suffering. Once on the other side, Orpheus continued his journey, entering the realm of Hades and Persephone, the rulers of the dead. The gates of the underworld loomed ahead, guarded by the fearsome three-headed dog, Cerberus. Yet, as Orpheus approached, Cerberus, who had never been moved by the pleas of mortals, was subdued by the power of Orpheus's song. The great beast, usually fierce and unyielding, lay down quietly, allowing Orpheus to pass unhindered. It was a sign of the magic that Orpheus's music held, capable of soothing even the most untamable creatures. Inside the underworld, Orpheus came before the throne of Hades and Persephone. The rulers of the dead sat in silence as he played his lyre, their expressions unreadable. Orpheus, his voice steady but filled with emotion, spoke his plea. He begged the gods of the underworld to return Eurydice to him, to allow her to return to the world of the living. He promised to never speak of the underworld again, to never look back at Eurydice as they ascended. In that moment, he offered not just his music, but his very soul. Hades and Persephone, moved by Orpheus's grief and the beauty of his song, deliberated in silence. It was a rare thing for the gods of the underworld to be moved by the pleas of mortals, but Orpheus was no ordinary man. His love for Eurydice, his devotion, and the music that had carried him to their doorstep all weighed heavily on the gods' hearts. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Hades spoke. His voice was deep and resonant, filled with the weight of ancient power. He agreed to Orpheus's request, but there was a condition. Orpheus could take Eurydice back to the world of the living, but he must not look back at her until they had both reached the surface. If he did, if he turned his gaze upon her before they emerged into the light, she would remain in the underworld forever. Orpheus, filled with a mixture of hope and doubt, accepted the condition. With a heavy heart, he agreed to the terms, knowing that the challenge before him would test not only his love, but his strength of will. The gods, moved by his devotion, opened the gates of the underworld, and Orpheus began the long journey back to the world of the living, his lyre still echoing through the dark halls. As he walked, the sound of his music began to shift. It was no longer a melody of sorrow alone, but one of hope, a song that promised redemption. Eurydice, though unseen, followed behind him, her presence a shadow in the distance. Orpheus could feel her there, could sense the faintest stirrings of her spirit, but he did not dare turn to look. The promise of the gods weighed heavily on his mind, and his love for Eurydice urged him forward. The road was long, and the silence between them grew louder with each step. Yet Orpheus's music never faltered. His fingers moved with ease across the strings of his lyre, his heart both full of love and filled with doubt. Could he truly endure the silence, the longing, until they reached the surface? The tension built with every passing moment, the distance between him and Eurydice both comforting and agonizing. As Orpheus ascended the dark pathways of the underworld, the weight of the task ahead of him pressed upon his heart. He could feel Eurydice behind him, a presence that seemed to linger just beyond his reach. Her soul, bound by the rules of the underworld, followed in silence, her form a mere shadow in the darkness. Orpheus could not see her, but he could sense her. He could feel the faint stirrings of her being in every note he played, every chord he strummed on his lyre. The gods had granted him this opportunity, this one chance to bring her back to life, but it came with a heavy cost. The condition set by Hades and Persephone was clear. Orpheus must not look back at Eurydice until they had both reached the surface of the living world. If he did, if he turned his gaze upon her before they were free of the underworld's grasp, she would remain forever in the realm of the dead. The uncertainty of this condition gnawed at Orpheus. How could he not look back at her? His heart ached with the need to see her, to reassure himself that she was truly behind him, that she was truly with him once more. Yet, the promise of her return, of their reunion in the world of the living, hung before him like a distant light. He could not afford to fail. He could not risk losing her again. With each step, Orpheus found himself caught between two desires, the longing to gaze upon Eurydice and the fear of breaking the sacred rule laid before him by the gods. His hands, though steady on his lyre, trembled ever so slightly, as if they too could feel the tension in the air. The path before him was dark, and though he knew the surface was not far, the journey seemed to stretch on endlessly. Every footstep felt like an eternity, the silence between them growing louder, the tension thickening with each moment. He played his lyre to fill the void, the music flowing from his fingers as if the very sound could steady his thoughts. The melody he played was a mixture of hope and sorrow, a song of longing and devotion. His heart poured into the music, each note an expression of the love he felt for Eurydice. Yet, despite the beauty of the melody, doubt lingered in the corners of his mind. What if she wasn't there? What if the gods had tricked him? What if, by the time he reached the surface, Eurydice had already been claimed once more by the shadows? But still, he pressed forward, his resolve firm. His music was his only guide now, the only tether to the world of the living. It was the only thing that could keep him moving forward in the face of the darkness that surrounded him. The path was narrow and winding, the air thick with the scent of earth and death. Yet Orpheus did not falter. He continued to play, each note a prayer, each chord a promise. And as he walked, he tried to push aside the growing temptation. He could not look back. He had promised the gods, and he had to keep his word. The thought of seeing her again, of turning and embracing her as they stepped back into the light, was a sweet vision that danced just out of reach. But it was a vision he could not make real. Not yet. The gods had set their rule, and Orpheus knew that disobeying it would mean the end of all hope. There was a part of him, deep inside, that feared the moment of truth. He feared that his heart, too fragile to withstand the weight of such longing, might give in to the temptation. It was as if the very act of holding back, of restraining himself from turning to look at her, was breaking him apart. His love for Eurydice was so deep, so pure, that the thought of losing her once again was a wound that cut to the very core of his being. He could feel the surface drawing closer, could sense the faint light at the end of the tunnel, the promise of the world beyond. His steps became lighter, his heart a little less heavy with each passing moment. And yet, the silence between him and Eurydice grew more pronounced. He could hear nothing but the sound of his own breath, the soft strumming of his lyre, and the distant murmur of the river Styx still echoing in his mind. With every step, the distance between them seemed to close, yet the tension remained. The rules of the underworld, the curse that held Eurydice in its grasp, still loomed over them like a dark cloud. Orpheus could feel the pull of that darkness, the force that sought to reclaim what he had fought so hard to bring back. It was a presence that lurked just behind him, waiting, watching, testing his will. And still, Orpheus continued forward, his lyre the only sound breaking the stillness. He played as if his life depended on it, because in a way, it did. His music was not just a source of comfort now, it was a lifeline. It was his connection to the living world, to the love that awaited him. Without it, without the promise of Eurydice's return, he was lost. The melody filled the space around him, weaving through the darkness and the silence, creating a fragile bridge between the realms of the living and the dead. But then, just as the end of the journey seemed within reach, Orpheus began to hear something else. A faint sound, a soft whisper in the distance. It was not the sound of Eurydice's footsteps, but something else, something more haunting. He could feel it in his bones, the pull of the underworld's grip tightening around him, testing his resolve. The world before him seemed to fade, and the weight of the moment bore down upon him. Was it time to look back? Could he truly bear the uncertainty any longer? He felt the urge growing stronger, the temptation becoming too much to resist. The moment that Orpheus had been dreading, the moment that had filled his every step with a quiet, nagging tension, had arrived. His heart, which had been steadily guiding him through the dark, now raced with a mixture of fear and longing. The distance between him and Eurydice had lessened, but with it, the silence between them had grown unbearably loud. His heart ached to turn, to see her face once more, to confirm that she was truly behind him, that she was truly walking beside him on this perilous journey back to life. He had promised the gods. He had made a pact, a promise that if he did not look back, Eurydice would be his, to keep, to love, and to cherish once again. Yet the temptation was overwhelming. The silence between them seemed to stretch out in endless waves, and with every step he took, he could feel Eurydice's presence slip further from him, as though the very distance between them was an unspoken reminder of the underworld's hold on her. How could he bear this unending silence, this uncertainty? The light at the end of the tunnel, the surface, the world of the living, was now visible. It flickered like a distant star, calling to him, drawing him nearer. But in that moment, it was not the light that held his focus. It was the image of Eurydice. Her presence was so real to him, yet still so far away, and the longing to see her, to know that she was truly there, was a desire that coursed through his veins. Orpheus, his fingers still delicately caressing the strings of his lyre, felt his resolve falter. His heart beat louder in his chest, drowning out the music. His mind whispered, "Just one glance, one look at her face, and then you can continue. Then you can fulfill your promise." It was a dangerous thought, one that threatened to shatter the delicate hope he had carried with him through the darkness. But it was a thought he could not silence. It was as though time itself had slowed in that moment. The world before him, the path, the light, seemed distant and distant still. Yet the urge to turn, to glimpse the love he had fought so hard to bring back, was undeniable. Orpheus's breath caught in his throat, and before he could fully understand the consequences of his action, he turned. The instant he looked, Eurydice's form seemed to fade. Her presence, once so tangible, dissolved into the darkness. The sound of his lyre faltered, a dissonant note ringing out as the world around him seemed to blur. Orpheus could hear her voice, faint but clear, calling to him from beyond the veil of the underworld. The finality of her departure was overwhelming, and in that moment the world grew eerily silent. Eurydice had been so close to him. But the underworld, like all things in the realm of death, could not be defied. The promise had been broken. She was gone. Orpheus felt a rush of sorrow unlike any he had known before. His heart shattered as the image of Eurydice's fading form was seared into his memory. She had been just within reach, but now she was lost to him again, swallowed by the darkness of the underworld. Her voice, soft and sorrowful, echoed in his ears as he turned back toward the surface. It was as if the earth itself had opened up to reclaim her, and in that moment, Orpheus could do nothing but stand still, paralyzed by grief. The music he had played so lovingly, so carefully, had been the one thing that could have saved her, but now it was too late. He stood there for what seemed like an eternity, the weight of his mistake settling upon him. The gods, in their infinite wisdom, had set the rule, and it was a rule that could not be broken. The path between the living and the dead was fragile, and the boundaries of life and death could not be crossed without consequence. Orpheus had learned that lesson too late. In the silence that followed, the underworld seemed to mock him. The dark winds whispered through the cavernous halls, carrying with them the faint sound of his own song, once filled with hope, now tainted with regret. The very stones of the underworld seemed to groan in sympathy, their cold surfaces a reminder of the tragedy that had unfolded. The gods had given Orpheus a second chance, but in his grief and longing, he had failed to see the value of their gift. The light that had flickered ahead of him now seemed distant and unattainable, a symbol of the life he could never have again. His love for Eurydice, his devotion to her, had brought him to this point, but it had also cost him everything. With great reluctance, Orpheus turned and began to make his way back toward the surface, the sounds of his lyre now hollow, the notes faltering in the air. His heart, once filled with hope, was now an empty vessel, consumed by the loss of his beloved. There was no going back, no undoing the mistake that had sealed their fate. Eurydice was lost to him once more, and Orpheus, the greatest of all musicians, was left to walk alone. The journey back to the world of the living was slow, each step a painful reminder of what could have been. Orpheus could no longer hear the music that had once filled his heart with joy. Instead, there was only silence, an oppressive, suffocating silence that hung heavily in the air. The world above seemed so far away, and the underworld, with all its sorrow, now felt like a permanent prison. And so, Orpheus continued his journey, no longer with hope in his heart, but with the quiet resignation that comes from having lost everything. His music, once so powerful, was now a mere echo of the past. The gods had given him his chance, but in the end, it had not been enough. Orpheus emerged from the depths of the underworld, the gates of the realm of the dead closing behind him with a final resounding echo. The world of the living greeted him with a harsh light, an unrelenting brightness that seemed to mock the grief that weighed heavy in his heart. The soft murmur of the river Styx faded as he stepped onto the earth once more, the land that had once been filled with the promise of love and music, now a place of unbearable silence. His lyre, still clutched in his hands, felt heavier than it ever had before. It had been the instrument of his greatest joy, the tool through which he had charmed gods, mortals, and creatures of all kinds. Now it seemed only a reminder of the loss he had suffered, a symbol of everything he had fought for and ultimately failed to bring back. Orpheus stood for a long moment at the edge of the underworld, staring at the bright horizon. His heart, once filled with hope and the vibrancy of life, now felt hollow, consumed by the grief of what he had lost. Eurydice was gone. He had seen her once more, had been so close to bringing her back into his arms. But the moment he had turned to look at her, she had slipped away, lost forever to the shadows of the dead. The world seemed so different now. The air, once sweet and full of the promise of life, now felt stifling. The trees, which had once swayed in time with his music, now stood motionless, as though the life had been drained from them. The rivers, which had once flowed with a gentle rhythm, now seemed stagnant, reflecting nothing but the dullness of his heart. Orpheus had returned to the world of the living, but it was no longer a place he recognized. It was as though the very fabric of existence had shifted. The sun, once a symbol of hope, now blazed in the sky with an oppressive intensity, its rays no longer offering warmth, but rather casting a shadow over the world he had once known. His music, too, had changed. The melodies that had once flowed so easily from his fingers now felt strained, the notes coming out of his lyre hollow and empty. Orpheus could no longer find joy in the music that had been his greatest gift. His love for Eurydice had been the source of his inspiration, the wellspring from which all his music had flowed. But now, without her, the melodies were but an echo of the past, a painful reminder of what could never be. In the days that followed, Orpheus wandered the earth, playing his lyre for anyone who would listen. But no longer did the animals gather around him, drawn by the sweetness of his song. No longer did the trees sway in time with his music. The world seemed to have turned its back on him, and the beauty of his music, once a bridge between the realms of the living and the dead, now seemed to fall on deaf ears. People would pass by, some stopping for a moment to listen, others too consumed by their own lives to pay him any mind. Orpheus, though, continued to play, his music a mournful cry that seemed to carry on the wind. The songs that had once been filled with joy and hope were now heavy with sorrow, a reflection of the deep, unhealable wound in his heart. His love for Eurydice was an ache that would never fade, a wound that time could not heal. It wasn't long before Orpheus's sorrow became well known. The people of Thrace, who had once admired him for his beauty and his skill, now looked upon him with pity. His music, which had once enchanted them, now seemed like a lament. They could see the pain in his eyes, the emptiness that had taken root in his soul. Orpheus no longer played for the joy of others. He played for himself, for the lost love that he could never reclaim. The women of Thrace, moved by the sorrow they saw in him, tried to comfort him. They, too, had been touched by the beauty of Orpheus's music, and now they sought to offer him solace. They saw in him a kindred spirit, a soul torn by loss, and they reached out to him, offering their affection. But Orpheus, consumed by his grief, rejected them all. His heart belonged to Eurydice, and though she was lost to him forever, he could not bring himself to love again. The more Orpheus rejected their advances, the more the women of Thrace grew frustrated. They could not understand why the great musician, who had once been the object of their admiration, now turned away from them. His music, which had once been a thing of beauty, now seemed to mock them. They began to grow angry, and in their anger they turned on him. One evening, as Orpheus sat alone by the edge of the river, playing his mournful song, the women of Thrace approached him. They had been watching him for some time, their frustration growing with each passing day. They could not bear his rejection any longer, and in their fury they decided to punish him. The women of Thrace, enraged by Orpheus's refusal, attacked him. They tore him apart with their bare hands, ripping the lyre from his grasp and casting his lifeless body into the river. The sound of his music, which had once filled the world with beauty, was silenced forever. Orpheus, the great musician, was gone. His lyre, the instrument of his soul, was broken, and his music was no more. The world had lost one of its greatest gifts, and though his name would live on in the songs of others, Orpheus himself would never play again. The gods, moved by the tragedy of Orpheus's death, took his lyre and placed it among the stars. It became a constellation, a reminder of the musician whose music had touched the hearts of gods and mortals alike. And though Orpheus was gone, his music would echo through the heavens, forever remembered. After Orpheus had returned from the underworld, his soul forever marked by the grief of losing Eurydice, his heart grew more distant from the world around him. His love for Eurydice, even in death, consumed him entirely. He no longer sought solace in the company of others, and the once vibrant music that had enchanted gods, animals, and mortals alike now resonated with sorrow alone. The people of Thrace, who had once revered him, began to notice the change. His music, though still beautiful, was no longer filled with the joy and hope that had once marked it. Now it was an expression of anguish, a cry that echoed his pain and loss. He had withdrawn from the world, isolating himself in his sorrow. Among those who had once admired him were the women of Thrace. They had seen Orpheus as a figure of beauty and talent, a man whose voice and music had captivated their hearts. But as his grief grew, so too did their curiosity. They could not understand the depth of Orpheus's sorrow, nor could they fathom why the great musician, who had once seemed so full of life, now turned away from them. They were drawn to him, moved by his profound beauty and the sadness that seemed to radiate from him. They tried to comfort him, offering their company, their affection, and their attempts to heal the sorrow that had taken root in his soul. Orpheus, however, rejected them. His heart had become a shrine to Eurydice, and he would not allow another into that sacred space. He refused their advances, not out of malice, but because he could not bring himself to love anyone other than Eurydice. To him, she was still alive, still present in every note of music he played. But the women of Thrace did not understand. Their love for Orpheus, once born out of admiration for his music, turned to frustration and confusion. They had given him everything: affection, kindness, and the beauty of their own love. But still, he would not turn to them. They were women of great beauty and charm, and they had never been rejected before. It was a sting to their pride that Orpheus refused to love them. The more Orpheus withdrew, the angrier the women became. What had once been admiration turned into resentment. They believed that Orpheus was mocking them, playing the role of the tragic lover while refusing to acknowledge the love they offered him. They were tired of his aloofness, his refusal to move on from the past. His sorrow, once a source of sympathy, became a source of irritation. One evening, as Orpheus sat alone by the river, playing his lyre, the women of Thrace gathered in secret, their hearts full of bitterness. The sound of his music drifted through the air, as haunting and beautiful as ever. But it only stirred their anger. His music, once a source of comfort, now seemed to mock them, a reminder of their rejection. The women, in their fury, approached Orpheus. He did not see them coming, so lost was he in his own sorrow, lost in the melodies that had once bridged the gap between the living and the dead. He did not hear their footsteps, nor did he notice the glint of anger in their eyes. His music, beautiful as it was, seemed to rise above all else, drowning out the world around him. The women reached him, and in a moment of collective rage, they tore him apart. Their hands, once gentle and yearning, became instruments of violence. They ripped the lyre from his hands, shattering it with their fury. They cast his body aside, leaving it to drift along the river that had once been a source of comfort for him. Orpheus, the great musician, the man whose music had charmed the gods and moved the very earth itself, was silenced forever. His body lay lifeless on the ground, and the world that had once been filled with the sound of his lyre was now devoid of its beautiful music. His heart, once so full of love and devotion, was still, its beat never to be heard again. The women of Thrace, having vented their frustration, stood over him, their anger fading into a quiet regret. What they had done could never be undone. They had torn apart the one person who had meant more to them than anyone else, and now they would have to live with the consequences of their actions. As Orpheus's body lay in the river, the gods, moved by the tragedy of his death, took action. They could not allow his story to end in such violence and sorrow. They gathered his dismembered body and, with great care, placed it in the heavens, where it would shine forever as a reminder of his music and his love. They transformed his lyre into a constellation, placing it among the stars for all to see. The gods, in their grief, allowed Orpheus to live on. His legacy would not be forgotten. His music, once so full of life, would continue to echo through the heavens, a symbol of the eternal power of love, music, and sorrow. Orpheus, though dead, was immortalized in the stars, his name and his song forever etched into the fabric of the universe. And so, Orpheus's story continued, not in the land of the living, but in the stars above. His music, though no longer heard on earth, would forever touch the hearts of those who looked up at the night sky, reminding them of the love he had lost and the beauty he had created. His journey, from the heights of joy to the depths of sorrow, would live on in the constellations, a tale that would never be forgotten. Orpheus's death was as tragic as the journey that had led him to that moment. The great musician, whose melodies had once calmed the hearts of gods and mortals alike, was silenced forever by the hands of the women of Thrace. The violence with which they tore him apart was a stark contrast to the beauty that had flowed from him through his music. His body, once a vessel of love and music, now lay broken, its connection to the world of the living severed. The world, in its sorrow, seemed to hold its breath. The forests, which had once swayed to the tune of his songs, stood motionless, their leaves trembling with the weight of loss. The rivers, which had been charmed by his music, now flowed with a quiet sadness, as if mourning the passing of the soul who had once made them dance. The very earth beneath his feet seemed to grieve the loss of the one who had given it voice. For Orpheus, there would be no return to life. His second chance at happiness, the brief hope of bringing Eurydice back, had been lost the moment he turned to look at her. That one mistake had sealed his fate, and now his song had come to an end. The underworld, with all its darkness, had claimed him once more, but not as a mere soul. He was a tragedy, a symbol of love unfulfilled and music left unheard. Yet, even in death, Orpheus's legacy did not fade. The gods, moved by the tragedy of his untimely end, could not bear to see him be forgotten. They took his dismembered body and, with great reverence, placed it on the banks of the river Hebrus. His limbs were gathered with care, and the beauty that had once poured from him was immortalized in a way that even death could not steal. The gods, in their mercy, transformed his lyre into a constellation. It was placed in the sky, a glowing symbol of Orpheus's music and the eternal love that had driven him to the depths of the underworld. The lyre, now a star, would shine brightly for all to see, a reminder of the greatness that had once been Orpheus's gift to the world. His music, though no longer heard on earth, would continue to echo through the cosmos, carried on the wings of time. The heavens themselves seemed to weep for Orpheus. The stars twinkled brighter that night, as if they too mourned the loss of the musician whose heart had been so pure and whose love had been so unwavering. Orpheus's name would live on in the stars, etched into the very fabric of the universe, a testament to the power of music, love, and the tragic beauty of his story. In the world below, the people of Thrace could not help but feel the weight of his passing. Though they had been the ones to reject him, to turn away from the musician who had once brought them joy, they could not deny the greatness of Orpheus's soul. His music had touched them all, and now without it, the land felt emptier, colder, and more distant. The women of Thrace, who had been the instruments of his death, were left to live with the consequences of their actions. Their anger had cost them the greatest gift they had ever known. Orpheus, though dead, remained a figure of immense power in their lives. They would never forget the music that had once filled their hearts, and they would never forget the man who had been taken from them by their own hands. As the years passed, Orpheus's legend grew. His story, a tale of love and loss, of devotion and sorrow, became a part of the very fabric of Greek mythology. His music, now a constellation, was passed down through generations. Poets and musicians would sing of his journey, of his tragic love for Eurydice, and his undying devotion. The memory of Orpheus would live on in the hearts of all who heard his story. And though Orpheus had been silenced in life, his legacy would never fade. His music would continue to inspire, to heal, and to remind the world of the beauty and the sorrow that exist in every heart. His story, from the heights of joy to the depths of grief, would be told for centuries to come. In the wake of Orpheus's tragic death, the gods, moved by the depth of his sorrow and the beauty of his music, could not bear to let his legacy slip into nothingness. Orpheus had given so much to the world. His music had been a bridge between the living and the dead, a voice that resonated with divine power and human emotion. To let his story end in such a violent and senseless way would be an injustice, even to those who had not fully understood the magnitude of his gift. Thus, the gods gathered, and from the sorrow of Orpheus' death, they created something eternal. His lyre, the instrument that had sung both joy and sorrow, love and loss, was taken from the earth and transformed. No longer bound by the laws of mortality, the lyre became a constellation placed high in the sky for all to see. This divine tribute was the gods' way of honoring the musician, whose music had once enchanted the very heavens. Orpheus's lyre was placed among the stars, its strings glowing softly in the night sky, a celestial reminder of the beauty that had once been born from the heart of a mortal. Each star in the constellation shimmered like the notes of Orpheus's song, the light echoing the music that had once flowed from his fingers. The lyre, though no longer heard on the earth, would forever sing its silent song, its melody a lasting imprint on the fabric of the universe. And so, Orpheus's music continued to resonate, even in death. The constellation became a symbol of his eternal influence, a reflection of the power that music holds over the hearts of both gods and mortals. In the darkness of the night, those who looked up to the stars could now see the lyre glowing gently among the heavens. It was a presence that could not be ignored, a beacon of light in a world that often seemed full of sorrow and uncertainty. The legend of Orpheus, his music, and his tragic love for Eurydice became woven into the fabric of human consciousness. Poets, philosophers, and artists looked to the stars and saw the lyre shining brightly, a reminder of the beauty and the pain of love. And though the world had lost Orpheus, his influence never truly faded. His story was told and retold, passed down through generations, inspiring countless souls who found solace in his music and in the tragic beauty of his life. The people of Thrace, who had once turned away from him, now stood in awe of the stars. They had not understood the depth of Orpheus's sorrow, nor had they fully grasped the significance of his music. But in the wake of his death, they came to realize that the man they had rejected was more than just a musician. He was a symbol of the human condition, a reminder that love and loss are intertwined in ways that transcend life itself. As they looked up at the stars, the people of Thrace could no longer deny the greatness of Orpheus. His music, though it had been silenced on earth, now filled the heavens. And in the silence of the night, they could hear the faintest echo of his song, drifting down from the stars, reaching across time and space, touching the hearts of all who listened. But Orpheus's lyre, now a constellation in the night sky, was more than just a tribute to his music. It was a reminder that even in the darkest moments there is light. Even in the deepest sorrow there is beauty. The lyre, though no longer played by Orpheus, continued to resonate with the power of his love and his music, a testament to the eternal bond between the living and the dead. It is said that when a person gazes upon the constellation of Orpheus's lyre, they are reminded of the delicate balance between life and death, between love and loss. The stars, like Orpheus's music, have the power to soothe the soul, to heal the wounds that time cannot erase. And in the stillness of the night, when the world is quiet and the heart is heavy, the lyre's gentle glow serves as a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is a song that will never fade. Before his life was consumed by the tragic loss of Eurydice and his eventual untimely death, Orpheus's music had not only captivated gods and mortals alike, but had also touched the hearts of creatures across the earth. His lyre, in its enchanting melody, had bridged the divide between all forms of life. Orpheus was not just a musician. He was a being who could speak to the very soul of nature itself. His music had the power to tame the wildest of animals, calm the fiercest of storms, and bring harmony to the natural world in ways no other mortal could. Orpheus's bond with the animal kingdom was deep and profound. It was said that whenever he played, creatures of all kinds, birds, deer, lions, wolves, and even the most elusive of creatures, would gather around him, drawn to the sound of his lyre. The music flowed from his hands like a river of serenity, and it was a gift that seemed to transcend the boundaries of understanding. Animals, which were often driven by their instincts and emotions, could feel the beauty of Orpheus's songs. They would approach him with a quiet reverence, as though they too recognized the divine power that emanated from him. The forests, once filled with the sounds of rustling leaves and the calls of birds, became places where harmony reigned when Orpheus played. The wind would slow, as if pausing to listen. The trees would bend toward him, their leaves whispering in time with the music. It was said that even the rocks and the rivers listened, as if the very earth itself had been enchanted by the beauty of Orpheus's melodies. The animals that gathered around him were not merely spectators. They were participants in the magic he created. Birds perched on the branches, their feathers still and their eyes wide in wonder. Wild deer would wander close, their delicate hooves silent on the ground, while even the more ferocious creatures, wolves, lions, lay at his feet, as if they were soothed by the power of his song. Orpheus had become a part of nature itself, and in return, nature responded with a quiet reverence. It was in these moments, surrounded by the creatures of the earth, that Orpheus found peace. His grief over the loss of Eurydice, though always present in the back of his mind, seemed to fade when he played for the animals. Their acceptance of him, without question or hesitation, offered him a kind of solace. In their stillness, in their willingness to listen, he could almost feel the presence of Eurydice again, a reminder of the love he had lost, but also the beauty that love had created. But as Orpheus's sorrow deepened, so too did his isolation. When he could no longer find comfort in the world around him, he withdrew even further into the silence of his grief. The animals, who had once gathered eagerly to hear his music, no longer came as frequently. His melodies, which had once filled the air with harmony, now carried only sorrow, and the creatures of the earth, sensitive to the shift in his heart, began to drift away. It is said that Orpheus, in his final days, became a figure of great melancholy. His music, though still hauntingly beautiful, was no longer able to soothe the animals as it once had. The forests, once alive with the rustling of creatures drawn to his song, became eerily quiet. The songs of birds were no longer accompanied by the gentle strumming of his lyre, and the herds of deer no longer gathered at his feet. Orpheus's isolation, both self-imposed and driven by his grief, had led him to a point where even the natural world, which had once been his refuge, could no longer offer him solace. But even in his loneliness, there was a quiet understanding between Orpheus and the animals that had once been so drawn to him. The creatures of the earth knew that he was a part of them, that his music had touched the deepest parts of their souls. And even as they drifted away, as the world seemed to turn its back on him, they remained connected to him through the beauty of his song. It was said that the last time Orpheus played his lyre, the birds came to listen, and the trees swayed gently in time with the music. Though he had been abandoned by the people of Thrace, by those he had once tried to connect with, the animals still recognized the purity of his heart. The sound of his music echoed through the forests one last time, a song that would never truly be forgotten, even after Orpheus himself was gone. When Orpheus died and the women of Thrace cast him aside, the land itself seemed to mourn. The creatures that had once surrounded him returned to their natural state, no longer drawn by the enchantment of his music, but carrying with them the memory of the man who had once made the earth itself sing. The animals would continue their lives, but they would forever remember Orpheus, the musician who had made the world a more harmonious place. And as Orpheus's lyre was placed in the sky as a constellation, the animals, too, looked up, as if to honor the memory of the one who had bridged the gap between them and the divine. In the quiet moments of the night, when the world fell still, it is said that the animals still listen, that they still remember the music of Orpheus, carried on the winds of time, a melody that transcended the barriers between life and death. Orpheus's connection to the natural world was not limited to the animals alone. His music also had the profound ability to speak to the trees, bringing life and harmony to the forests in ways that no one before him had ever achieved. His songs were not merely a celebration of the divine or the human heart. They were an invocation of the world itself. The trees, rooted deep in the earth, stood as silent witnesses to the symphony Orpheus wove around them, swaying and bending in time with the music, as though the very fabric of nature responded to the rhythm of his soul. When Orpheus played, the trees of the forest seemed to come alive. The mighty oaks, the graceful willows, and the tall pines all stood in a silent dance to his melody. The leaves would rustle softly, their movement almost imperceptible, yet it was as though each branch, each bough, reached out in reverence to the music that flowed from Orpheus's lyre. It was not merely the sound of the music that captivated the trees, but the intention behind it, a deep, unspoken understanding that transcended language. The ancient oaks, their trunks gnarled and weathered by time, would sway in rhythm with the melody, their leaves fluttering like the wings of a bird in flight. The willows, with their long, flowing branches, would bend and arc gracefully, as if they too were caught in the emotion of the song. The tall pines, standing as sentinels in the forest, would gently sway, their needles shimmering in the light, as though they were waving in silent agreement with the music. The trees, in their stillness, had a unique way of reflecting the emotions conveyed through Orpheus's music. When he played a song of joy, the forest would echo with a vibrant energy, and the trees would stand tall, their leaves bright and full of life. But when Orpheus played his songs of sorrow, songs born of the loss of Eurydice, songs that carried the weight of a broken heart, the trees too would bend under the gravity of his grief. The once sturdy branches would droop, the leaves would darken, and the wind would carry a melancholy whisper, as though the entire forest mourned with him. Even the most ancient trees, those that had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, seemed to bend in understanding to the sadness that filled Orpheus's heart. The great trees that lined the paths in the forests of Thrace would lower their branches, their leaves trembling in the quiet of the night as Orpheus poured out his pain through his music. The connection between him and the trees was not one of mere admiration or passive observation. It was a symbiotic bond, as if the trees themselves had souls, and Orpheus's music was the song that awakened them. In the days after Eurydice's loss, Orpheus sought refuge in the forest more than ever before. He wandered the woods, playing his lyre, hoping that the trees might offer him the solace that human company could not. The trees, ever steadfast, provided him a silent refuge, a place where his sorrow could be expressed without words. He would sit beneath the canopy of leaves, surrounded by the gentle swaying of the trees, and play for hours. His melodies would weave through the branches, resonating through the trunks, reaching deep into the earth, and pulling out the sorrow that filled his heart. The forest became his sanctuary, a place where his grief could be fully expressed, and his music could flow unhindered. The trees, in turn, seemed to embrace him with their silent presence. They offered no words, no judgments, only a shared understanding of the depth of his sorrow. The rustling of their leaves in the breeze became a quiet accompaniment to his music, a gentle affirmation of the emotions he poured into his songs. The trees did not need to speak. Their very presence was enough. But as time passed, Orpheus began to notice a change. The forest, once so full of life and energy, seemed to grow quieter. The trees, which had once swayed and danced with his music, now stood still, their branches unmoving, their leaves silent. The wind, which had once carried the songs of Orpheus through the forest, now seemed to pause, as if holding its breath. Orpheus, in his grief, had become so lost in his sorrow that even the trees could no longer respond to him. His music, once so full of life, had become a cry of despair that reverberated through the forest, and the very earth seemed to retreat from him. One day, as Orpheus sat beneath the canopy of the trees, strumming his lyre, he realized that the forest had grown quiet. The leaves no longer rustled in time with his music. The branches no longer swayed. The trees stood motionless, their once vibrant energy now drained. It was as though the very soul of the forest had been consumed by his sorrow. The forest, like the world around him, had grown tired of mourning. In that moment, Orpheus understood. His music, which had once spoken to the very heart of the earth, had now become a symbol of his isolation. The trees, which had once shared in his joy and sorrow, could no longer offer him solace. He was alone in his grief, and the world around him had grown silent in response. It was in that silence, surrounded by the stillness of the trees, that Orpheus realized the full weight of his loss. His music, once a bridge between the realms of the living and the dead, had now become a solitary lament. He had lost not only Eurydice, but also the connection he had once shared with the natural world. The trees, the animals, the very earth itself had all retreated from him, unable to share in the depth of his sorrow any longer. The curse of the house of Atreus is one of the most tragic and convoluted tales in Greek mythology, a tale of betrayal, vengeance, and the destructive power of the gods. It It was a curse that haunted generations, one that Orpheus, in his own sorrow, became a part of. Though he was not directly involved in the events that led to the curse, his music, like the stories of many ancient heroes, intersected with the fates of those cursed by the gods. Orpheus's story was marked by his tragic love for Eurydice, a love that transcended death and took him to the very gates of the underworld. Yet, the echo of his journey would ripple through the world, touching the lives of those bound by the curse of Atreus. The house of Atreus, once a royal family in Mycenae, was cursed by the gods because of a series of grievous crimes committed by its rulers. The curse began with Tantalus, a king who, in a horrific act of hubris, served his own son Pelops as a meal to the gods. Furious at this grotesque offering, the gods condemned Tantalus to an eternity of torment in the underworld and placed a curse upon his descendants. This curse would continue to haunt the family, casting a shadow over their bloodline for generations to come. The descendants of Atreus, including Agamemnon, Menelaus, and their children, were caught in a cycle of murder, revenge, and betrayal. In a tragic twist, the curse led to Agamemnon's own sacrifice of his daughter Iphigenia to appease the gods and secure victory in the Trojan War. After the war, Agamemnon's return to Mycenae was marked by betrayal and death at the hands of his wife Clytemnestra, who murdered him in revenge for the sacrifice of their daughter. Clytemnestra's act of revenge would then give rise to another cycle of violence, culminating in the eventual death of her own son, Orestes, who was bound by the will of the gods to avenge his father's death. Orpheus, though he was far removed from the direct conflict of the house of Atreus, became intertwined with its tragic fate in a moment that echoed with the same themes of loss, betrayal, and divine retribution that had plagued the family for generations. It is said that Orpheus, in his later years, encountered the descendants of Atreus, including the tragic figures of Agamemnon's children. Having already lost so much, Orpheus found their stories of familial strife to be painfully familiar. In a way, his own personal grief mirrored the curse that had followed the Atreides. Just as his love for Eurydice had led him to a tragic and irreversible fate, the Atreides' history was one of endless cycles of vengeance, born of divine anger and mortal pride. It is in this context that Orpheus, whose music had once soothed the hearts of gods and mortals alike, played for those affected by the curse of Atreus. His melodies resonated with the tragedy of their lives. For Orpheus, his sorrow had become something universal, something that could transcend his own pain and connect him with the suffering of others. The curse of Atreus, with all its dark implications, was something that Orpheus, as a man who had suffered deep loss, could understand on a profound level. But even Orpheus, with all his understanding of the pain of the human heart, could not escape the inevitability of fate. The stories of the Atreides, filled with violence and vengeance, became a mirror for his own life, a reminder that no matter how beautiful or tragic his music, there were forces at work that no mortal could change. The gods had their designs on the world, and for the house of Atreus, the hand of divine justice had already been set in motion. Orpheus, as he played for those who suffered the curse, could only bear witness to the consequences of their actions. His own music, though filled with sorrow and compassion, could not undo the past. And so, like the tragic figures of the house of Atreus, Orpheus too was bound by fate. His music, once a powerful tool of connection and healing, became a symbol of his acceptance of the inevitability of loss. He could no longer change the past, nor could he break the chains of grief that held him. His life, like the lives of the Atreides, was an endless cycle of love, loss, and the search for redemption that would never fully be realized. Yet, even in the face of the curse of Atreus, Orpheus continued to play, pouring his grief into his music, reaching for something that could transcend the pain. The gods may have imposed their will upon the lives of men, but Orpheus's music, though it could not undo the past, could still offer a brief moment of peace in the midst of suffering. The echoes of his song, though faint, could still touch the hearts of those who heard it, offering a fleeting sense of connection, even as fate continued its unyielding march forward. Though Orpheus's life was marked by sorrow and music, his story occasionally intertwined with other significant events in Greek mythology, none more so than the Trojan War. This great conflict, which would come to define the fates of many heroic figures, also had a subtle connection to the life of Orpheus, whose music was as powerful as any weapon in the hands of warriors. The Trojan War, fought between the Greeks and the Trojans, would shape the course of history, but it would also bring about tragic consequences for those involved, including Orpheus. At the time of the war, Orpheus, having already lost his beloved Eurydice and experienced the depths of sorrow, wandered the world, seeking solace in the sound of his lyre. Though his grief was unrelenting, his music continued to have an undeniable effect on all who heard it, whether they were gods, men, or beasts. The music of Orpheus was known to have a special power, a power that transcended borders, uniting those who listened in a shared understanding of beauty and sadness. His ability to calm the hearts of even the most ferocious creatures had earned him a reputation that spread beyond the quiet forests of Thrace, reaching the warriors who marched toward the gates of Troy. Orpheus's music had a unique place in the events of the Trojan War. It is said that when the Greek army was preparing to set sail for Troy, they stopped at the shores of the Aegean to perform a ritual to appease the gods and ensure safe passage. Among the warriors gathered for the journey was Orpheus, who, though not a soldier himself, had come to offer his music as a gift to the men who would soon face the horrors of war. His songs, it was believed, would bring them peace of mind and strength of heart, and his lyre would bring calm to the storm that would soon rage across the seas. As the fleet assembled, Orpheus played. His music rang out over the waves, flowing across the ocean like a soft breeze, filling the air with its soothing melody. His songs were filled with a deep yearning for peace, a longing for the harmony that had been lost in the wake of the war. The warriors who heard the music, even those with hearts hardened by the anticipation of battle, were moved. For a brief moment, the tension in their hearts eased, and the weight of the coming conflict seemed to lift. It is said that even the gods, who were watching the preparations for war unfold, paused to listen. The gods of Mount Olympus, who had long played their games of fate, had their hearts softened by Orpheus's music. Even Zeus, the king of the gods, who had a hand in the destiny of every mortal, was affected by the beauty of the songs. He, too, knew that war would bring much pain, and for that brief moment, the anger and violence that often consumed the gods seemed to fade. But the peaceful effect of Orpheus's music was fleeting. Though it calmed the hearts of the warriors and the gods alike, the reality of the war could not be ignored. As the fleet set sail toward Troy, the power of Orpheus's song slowly faded, and the violent winds of war began to take hold once more. The men of Greece, who had been filled with a brief sense of peace, now steeled themselves for the horrors that awaited them. The fate of Troy was sealed in blood and fire, and the beauty of Orpheus's music could not hold back the storm of war. Orpheus himself, though a figure of peace and sorrow, was not immune to the events of the war. The conflict, though distant from his own grief, would touch him in ways he had not expected. While he continued to wander, playing for those who would listen, Orpheus's heart was torn between his desire for peace and the reality of the world around him. He longed for the return of harmony, for the world to be filled once more with the music that had once connected all living things. But he knew that this could never happen while the war raged on. It is said that Orpheus' sorrow deepened as he learned of the terrible deeds done in the name of war. The brutal sacrifice of Iphigenia, Agamemnon's daughter, and the loss of so many Greek and Trojan lives weighed heavily on his heart. Each new tragedy that came to him, each new death that he heard of, added to the burden he already carried. His music, once so full of life, now seemed to mirror the suffering that he witnessed around him. It became a lament, a cry for the souls lost to the wrath of the gods. The impact of the Trojan War on Orpheus was profound. His grief, which had always been personal, now expanded to encompass the suffering of the entire world. As he wandered the earth playing his lyre, Orpheus became a symbol of the human condition, a symbol of the love that leads to loss, the peace that gives way to violence, and the hope that is consumed by despair. His music was no longer just for himself or for the animals and trees he once loved. It was for the entire world, a world that seemed to be spiraling ever deeper into chaos. In the years that followed, after the fall of Troy, Orpheus's music would continue to echo the pain of the war. He would play for the survivors, the broken men who had returned from the battlefield, their hearts heavy with the weight of what they had seen and done. His music would offer them a brief respite from their memories, a fleeting moment of peace in a world forever scarred by the violence of war. Orpheus was not only a gifted musician, but also a master of storytelling. His music had the ability to convey more than just emotion. It could speak the very essence of a story, bringing it to life in ways that words alone could not. Orpheus's songs were often filled with narratives that transcended the realm of mere myth, weaving complex tales of love, loss, and the human condition. His music had the rare power to give voice to the silence of the world around him, to draw out the stories of gods, mortals, and creatures that would otherwise have gone unheard. Though his most well-known tale was the love story of his tragic journey to retrieve Eurydice, Orpheus's role as a storyteller stretched far beyond that singular event. His lyre, though a tool of beauty and sorrow, was also an instrument of history. The stories he told through his music were not confined to the limits of his own personal pain, but reached outward to encompass the entire world. The power of Orpheus's music was such that his tales could captivate all who heard them. In the grand halls of the gods, in the quiet forests of Thrace, or among the people gathered in the streets, Orpheus's songs spread like a gentle breeze, touching every ear with a story. Through his lyre, Orpheus could tell the tales of the gods, of their triumphs and failures, their loves and betrayals, and he could tell the stories of mortals, of the lives they lived, the mistakes they made, and the journeys they undertook. Orpheus was a bridge between worlds, a conduit for stories that transcended the barriers of life and death. One of the most profound aspects of Orpheus's storytelling was his ability to speak to the very core of human experience. His music could make even the most mundane events seem imbued with meaning, his melodies weaving a deeper understanding of the lives we lead and the emotions we feel. His songs could transform the smallest of moments into grand epics, elevating ordinary acts into extraordinary tales. Orpheus's music was not bound by the constraints of time or space. It could convey a lifetime's worth of stories in a single note, bringing to life the past, the present, and even the future. It was said that Orpheus's songs could change the hearts of those who heard them. Those who were filled with rage could be calmed. Those who were lost could find direction, and those who were broken could find solace. His ability to tell stories through his music was not limited to his own experiences. It extended to the lives of all who listened. Orpheus was a storyteller in the truest sense of the word. His lyre, the instrument that carried his tales across the world, bringing wisdom and understanding to those who heard them. One of the most remarkable aspects of Orpheus's storytelling was his ability to tell the story of life and death itself. His music was a reflection of the balance between these two forces, capturing the fleeting nature of life and the permanence of death. Orpheus's songs often spoke of the inevitability of loss, yet they also celebrated the beauty of life. His tales were filled with sorrow, but they were also filled with love, the kind of love that could transcend the boundaries of life and death. Orpheus understood that life, in all its beauty and pain, was a story that could not be fully told without acknowledging its inevitable end. He saw death not as a finality, but as a continuation of the story, a natural progression that added depth and meaning to the narrative of existence. This understanding of life and death was reflected in his music, in the way he told his stories. His melodies spoke of love, of the longing for something lost, and of the bittersweet joy that comes with knowing that everything, no matter how beautiful, will one day fade. Through his music, Orpheus was able to give voice to the stories of those who had passed before him, gods, heroes, and mortals alike. The stories he told through his lyre were not just tales of mythological figures, but stories of the human experience. Orpheus's music connected the past to the present, reminding those who heard it that the stories of old were not simply relics of a distant time, but lessons to be learned, emotions to be felt, and experiences to be shared. In the quiet moments when Orpheus played his lyre, he did more than just tell a story. He created a world. His music had the ability to transport those who listened to another place, another time, where the tales of gods and mortals unfolded before their very eyes. His songs were not just about the events they described. They were about the emotions they invoked, the connections they made, and the understanding they offered. Orpheus's power as a storyteller was not limited to the realm of the living. His journey to the underworld to retrieve Eurydice was itself a story that bridged the gap between the two worlds. Through his music, Orpheus was able to enter the realm of the dead and tell the stories of the living, speaking to the gods and the souls trapped in the underworld. In this way, his music became a bridge between life and death, a means of connecting the worlds that were otherwise kept apart. In the years following his tragic end, Orpheus's stories lived on. His songs were passed down through the generations, carried by the winds, the rivers, and the very hearts of those who heard them. The lessons Orpheus imparted through his music, the power of love, the inevitability of loss, and the beauty of life, remained etched in the hearts of all who listened. And though he was no longer there to play his lyre, his stories continued to be told, echoing through the ages, a reminder of the eternal power of music and storytelling. Though Orpheus's life was tragically short and marked by loss, his legacy lived on for centuries, not only through his music, but also through the numerous depictions of him in Greek art. His image, often associated with his lyre, became a symbol of divine inspiration, of the power of music, and of the connection between the human and the divine. Artists throughout antiquity sought to capture the essence of Orpheus's gift, representing him in various forms, from statues to pottery, and from murals to mosaics, each piece telling the story of the man whose music could move the heavens. Orpheus, more than any other figure in Greek mythology, became a central subject in Greek art because of the profound emotional and symbolic weight of his myth. In the visual depictions of Orpheus, he was often shown playing his lyre, the instrument that both defined and immortalized him. Whether depicted in a state of quiet reflection, serenading the animals, or traveling into the underworld, Orpheus's image conveyed both beauty and sorrow, evoking a sense of deep, melancholic harmony. The Greeks had a particular affinity for portraying Orpheus in scenes that depicted him surrounded by nature. Artists often showed him sitting in tranquil landscapes, his lyre in hand, playing for the animals and the trees, which in turn seemed to sway and listen. These depictions spoke to the connection Orpheus had with the natural world, his music a force that transcended human experience and resonated with the very earth itself. In many of these artworks, the trees and animals are drawn with great detail, capturing the quiet reverence that Orpheus inspired in the creatures of the world. The animals, often portrayed with their heads tilted in awe, became a visual representation of the power of music to bridge the gap between man and nature. Some of the most famous depictions of Orpheus show him in his journey to the underworld, a scene filled with dramatic tension. In these works, Orpheus is often shown playing his lyre as he walks through the dark, foreboding realm of the dead, with Hades and Persephone seated on their thrones, their expressions softened by the beauty of his song. These scenes serve to remind the viewer of Orpheus's great emotional depth, his love for Eurydice so powerful that it could move the hearts of the gods and sway the forces of life and death itself. One of the most enduring representations of Orpheus in Greek art is found on the countless pieces of pottery where he is frequently depicted in the act of playing his lyre. These painted vases often show him surrounded by trees, animals, and even gods, with the artist capturing the very moment of Orpheus's musical performance. The intricate details on these vases reveal the reverence with which the ancient Greeks held Orpheus, not just as a musician, but as a symbol of divine harmony. His figure is often portrayed in an almost ethereal light, as though he existed both within the world of mortals and beyond it, in the realm of the gods. These works of art were not merely decorative, they were imbued with meaning. The Greeks believed that art had the power to preserve stories, to immortalize figures of great significance, and to invoke the emotions of the past. Through their depictions of Orpheus, they ensured that his legacy would continue to resonate through time, inspiring future generations. His image was not just that of a tragic lover, but that of a figure who represented the intersection of the human and the divine, a man whose music could communicate with the gods and with nature itself. Orpheus also became an important figure in the Roman period, where his image continued to be used to represent the power of music and poetry. The Romans, who admired Greek culture, often adopted the motifs and symbols of Greek art, including Orpheus. In Roman art, he was depicted in a similar way to the Greeks, playing his lyre, surrounded by animals or in the company of gods, but with a more developed sense of allegory. Roman artists frequently used Orpheus to symbolize the themes of loss and redemption, and his figure was often depicted in works meant to evoke the fragility of life and the enduring power of love. In later centuries, Orpheus's image would continue to inspire artists, poets, and musicians. During the Renaissance, when classical themes were revived, Orpheus was once again depicted in paintings, sculptures, and literary works. His figure, now interpreted through the lens of Renaissance humanism, came to represent not only the divine gift of music, but also the ideal of the universal man, someone who could connect the arts with the divine. The famous painter Raphael, for instance, depicted Orpheus as a symbol of the triumph of art over the forces of chaos and death. Through these countless works of art, Orpheus's legacy as a musician and a storyteller endured long after his death. His story, one of tragic love, loss, and transcendence, became an enduring part of the cultural consciousness, not just in ancient Greece, but throughout the ages. The images of Orpheus captured by Greek and Roman artists continue to inspire modern audiences, who still find beauty in the way his music spoke to the deepest parts of the human soul. Orpheus, who had once been a mere mortal, had been transformed by the power of art and music into a timeless figure, one whose story was etched into the very fabric of history. His image, whether captured in the stillness of a painting, the delicacy of a sculpture, or the stirring beauty of a song, continued to serve as a reminder that music and art have the power to transcend time, to heal sorrow, and to connect all living things to the divine. Orpheus's story, woven with themes of love, loss, and music, speaks not only to the gods and mortals of Greek mythology, but to the universal human experience. His journey, though tragic, transcends the mythological context in which it is set. It is a story that continues to resonate with people across cultures and generations, touching on themes that are timeless and deeply ingrained in the human soul. Orpheus's life and music embody the eternal cycle of love and loss, a cycle that repeats itself throughout human history. At the heart of Orpheus's tale lies the idea of undying love, the kind that endures even after death. His love for Eurydice was so profound that he was willing to risk everything, his very soul, for a chance to bring her back from the underworld. This love, while pure and selfless, also led to his downfall. The moment Orpheus turned to look at Eurydice, the very act of giving in to his longing, resulted in her eternal loss. And yet, the cycle of love and loss that Orpheus experiences is far from unique. It is a cycle that all humans face in some form, the tension between holding on and letting go, the desire to preserve love in the face of inevitable change. In the moment that Orpheus looked back, he encountered the paradox that all lovers face, the inability to fully reconcile the past with the present. In his heart, Orpheus believed that if he could only see Eurydice once more, the love they shared would be restored and the pain of losing her would end. But the act of looking back of trying to hold on to what was already gone, resulted in her loss for good. It was in that fleeting moment of longing and doubt that Orpheus experienced the central conflict of the human condition, the need to cling to the past while confronting the reality of the present. The tension between these two forces is a universal one that is part of the cycle of love, loss, and renewal that marks every life. The tragic nature of Orpheus' tale lies not only in the loss of Eurydice, but also in the way it illuminates the fragility of love itself. Love, in its deepest and most sincere form, is often bound by forces beyond our control. Orpheus's journey to the underworld symbolizes the lengths to which we are willing to go for love, sometimes facing the darkest, most unknown realms. But it also highlights the harsh reality that love, like all things in life, is impermanent. The human experience is marked by moments of connection and disconnection, of creation and destruction. Orpheus's inability to bring Eurydice back from the underworld serves as a reminder that even the most profound love cannot escape the inevitability of loss. Yet, even in the face of this profound loss, Orpheus's music remains a testament to the endurance of love. His music, born from the deepest pain of his heart, transcends his individual grief. It becomes a source of healing for others, a bridge that connects both the living and the dead. Though Orpheus loses Eurydice forever, his music endures, just as love itself does in the memories we hold of those we have lost. Music, in the world of Orpheus, becomes the enduring echo of love, a love that continues even after death, woven into the fabric of the world itself. In many ways, Orpheus's tragic journey embodies the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Love is not a static force. It evolves, changes, and transforms through time. Though Orpheus cannot restore Eurydice to life, the love they shared becomes a part of him, shaping his music and his journey long after her death. His music becomes the way he continues to communicate with her, even though she is no longer physically present. This idea of love transcending death speaks to a deeper truth, that love, once given, can never be fully extinguished. It may change form, but it endures. Orpheus's music, in its sadness and its beauty, becomes a means of keeping that love alive. Moreover, the theme of rebirth appears in the way Orpheus's story is perpetuated through art, mythology, and the collective memory of humanity. Just as Orpheus's music continues to echo through the generations, his story itself has been retold countless times, transforming through the ages. Each retelling of his myth is a form of renewal, a way of resurrecting his legacy and allowing his music to live on in new forms. The act of telling stories, of passing down wisdom through generations, is itself a form of resurrection, a way of keeping the essence of those who have passed alive in the hearts and minds of others. Orpheus' death at the hands of the Maenads, though tragic, is also a form of closure. His life, his love, and his music all come full circle in his death. And just as the Maenads tear him apart, they, in a sense, set his music free. The dismemberment of Orpheus' body mirrors the disintegration of the human form, but his soul, his music, lives on. The lyre, the instrument of his greatest gift, is placed among the stars as a constellation, ensuring that Orpheus's legacy continues to shine long after he is gone. His music, though silenced in life, becomes eternal in the heavens. Thus, Orpheus's life and death reflect the universal human experience of love, loss, and the search for meaning in a world that is constantly changing. His music, which carried both the beauty of love and the weight of grief, speaks to something deeper than mere myth. It speaks to the essence of what it means to be human, to love, to lose, to mourn, and to keep going, carrying the echoes of those we have lost within us. Orpheus, though separated from Eurydice, will forever remain entwined with her in his music, their love becoming part of the eternal cycle of life and death, of love and loss. Orpheus's music, beyond its ability to charm animals, trees, and even gods, stands as a profound symbol of the universal power of art itself. His lyre transcended cultural, social, and divine boundaries, offering a connection between all beings, human and non-human alike. In the world of Greek mythology, Orpheus's music was a unique gift, one that could reach into the very soul of nature, molding reality itself. Yet, as powerful as Orpheus's music was, it also highlights an essential truth: that music, at its core, is an expression of the deepest parts of the human spirit. Through his music, Orpheus shared something profound with the world, an expression of love, grief, joy, and the understanding of life's fleeting nature. When Orpheus played, he was not merely creating sound. His music was the reflection of his soul, his emotions, and his experience in the world. This connection between the artist and the creation is a thread that runs throughout all art forms, where the artist channels their internal state into something external that others can experience. Orpheus, through his music, was able to communicate his innermost grief, and yet that grief transformed into something beautiful, something that others could understand and relate to. It's this universality of music that allowed Orpheus to be heard by so many different creatures and beings. Animals, drawn to the sound of his lyre, were soothed by it. Something primal within them responded to the vibrations, offering a brief respite from their instinctual drives. Trees and rivers, which exist in a state of quiet observation too, were moved by the beauty of his song. It was as though Orpheus's music spoke to a deeper layer of existence, one that transcended language, culture, and even the realm of gods and mortals. But Orpheus's music was also a medium for expressing and processing the deepest of human emotions. His tale, filled with love and loss, highlights music's role in human experience, how it allows us to mourn, to celebrate, and to share in our most profound connections. Orpheus, even in his deepest sorrow, was able to channel his emotions into his music, giving them shape and voice. His song became a vehicle for navigating the painful yet transformative journey of grief. By playing, he was able to express the pain of losing Eurydice, not through words, but through an art that spoke to the soul. His music, in its sorrow, became a kind of catharsis, not only for Orpheus, but also for those who heard it. Just as we may cry when we hear a sad song or find joy in an uplifting melody, Orpheus's music allowed listeners to experience their own emotions, processed through his art. His songs invited others to reflect on their own love, loss, and the complexities of life. In this way, Orpheus's music bridged the gap between the artist and the audience, creating a shared emotional experience that transcended the boundaries of individual existence. One of the most beautiful aspects of Orpheus's story is how his music acts as a means of transformation. Music, for Orpheus, was not simply a passive expression of emotion. It was a force for change. When he played, the very fabric of reality seemed to shift. His music tamed wild animals, calmed the stormy seas, and even made gods and spirits pause in their endless tasks. In the underworld, his music was so powerful that it softened the hearts of Hades and Persephone, granting him the impossible, permission to bring Eurydice back from death. In his music, Orpheus touched the divine. The gods themselves were not immune to the power of his song. This connection between music and the divine is not unique to Orpheus in Greek mythology. Music, in the ancient world, was often seen as a divine gift, a connection between the mortal and the immortal. The Muses, the goddesses of inspiration, were the patrons of music and poetry, and it was through their divine influence that Orpheus was able to create his powerful songs. His music, like the gifts of the gods, carried with it a sacredness that allowed it to transcend human limits. It was through his music that Orpheus was able to reach into the underworld itself and challenge death. However, it is important to note that Orpheus's music was not without consequence. His journey into the underworld, his attempt to bring back Eurydice, was fueled by the deep power of his grief. Yet it was also tied to the concept of hubris, the belief that he, through his art, could defy the laws of the gods and of nature. The tragic outcome of his attempt to look back at Eurydice underscores the tension between human desire and divine will. While Orpheus's music was transformative and beautiful, it also had its limits. The gods' command was absolute, and even Orpheus's divine gift could not overcome that. In many ways, Orpheus's music represents the dual nature of artistic creation, the power to heal, to transform, but also to reveal the fragility and limitations of the human condition. Orpheus, through his art, is able to reach extraordinary heights, to charm even the gods, yet his greatest failure comes from the very art that defined him. His inability to resist the temptation to look back, symbolizing the human desire to cling to the past, becomes his undoing. Music, as powerful and beautiful as it is, cannot turn back time or defy fate. It cannot undo the natural cycles of life and death. Yet, in the end, Orpheus's music endures. His legacy lives on, not only through the myths told of him, but through the eternal symbol he has become in the history of art. Music, at its best, expresses the deepest truths of our existence, capturing both the joy and the sorrow that make us human. Orpheus's story reminds us that music is not only a gift to the world, it is a mirror of our hearts, reflecting the complexities of love, loss, and the longing for redemption. Orpheus, like many figures from Greek mythology, transcended the realms of mortal understanding and entered the domain of the divine and the eternal. His journey to the underworld not only marks a pivotal moment in his story, but also reflects the deeper beliefs surrounding death, the afterlife, and the possibility of redemption in ancient Greek culture. In many ways, Orpheus's tale is a metaphor for the human desire to defy death, to reach beyond the veil that separates the living from the dead. His attempt to bring Eurydice back to life was an act of pure love, but it also mirrored the ancient Greek understanding of death as something immutable, something that no mortal or god could fully undo. When Orpheus entered the underworld to retrieve his wife, he was crossing into a realm where even gods could not alter the ultimate fate of souls. Hades, the ruler of the underworld, was a god who represented death's finality, and the underworld itself was the domain where all souls, regardless of their status in life, would eventually come to rest. In ancient Greek beliefs, the underworld was not necessarily a place of torment, but a shadowy realm where souls lived on in a form of eternal rest. It was a domain of both judgment and peace, with different areas, such as the Elysian fields for the virtuous and Tartarus for the wicked. Orpheus's journey to the underworld symbolizes the human desire to challenge this natural order. He sought to bring back his beloved Eurydice from the realm of the dead, an act that not only spoke to his undying love for her, but also to the profound human wish to overcome the finality of death. In his quest, Orpheus crossed the boundary between the living and the dead, and in doing so, he entered the realm of the gods, where the power of his music could soften even the coldest hearts. The fact that Orpheus was granted the rare opportunity to bring Eurydice back to life suggests that his connection to the divine was exceptional. Music, in the Greek worldview, had divine origins. It was a gift from the gods, most notably from Apollo and the Muses. Orpheus's music, then, carried with it not only the power to charm nature and humans, but also to bridge the gap between life and death. The gods, moved by his devotion and his sorrow, allowed him this fleeting chance. But the condition was clear. He must not look back at Eurydice until they had reached the world of the living. In Greek mythology, the ability to cross the boundary between life and death was a rare and difficult feat, even for those with divine favor. Orpheus's tragic mistake, turning to look at Eurydice before they had reached the surface, was a reminder of the Greeks' belief in the inevitability of death. No matter how powerful one's love or how beautiful one's music, death was an inescapable force. It was this inevitability that made Orpheus's story so poignant. He was, in the end, a symbol of the human desire to defy fate. Yet his inability to do so served as a reminder that the boundaries between life and death are not to be crossed. But Orpheus's journey also brings a deeper understanding of the Greek view of the afterlife. While the ancient Greeks believed in a kind of eternal existence in the underworld, it was not an existence that was filled with joy or sorrow in the same way life on earth was. The souls in the underworld lived in a muted state, a quiet and eternal existence that lacked the passions of the living world. The idea of the soul being separated from the body was a central aspect of Greek thought, and the underworld itself represented a place where those who had died existed in a state of separation from the world of the living. Orpheus, however, was not content with this separation. His love for Eurydice drove him to make an impossible journey to bring her back, believing that love could overcome even death itself. In this way, his story speaks to the broader human desire for unity, an attempt to reunite with lost loved ones, to defy the silence that follows death. Orpheus's plea to Hades and Persephone to bring Eurydice back to life is not just a request for her physical return. It is a yearning for a reunion, for a reconnection that transcends the boundaries of death. But in his attempt to reverse death, Orpheus also encountered the limits of what even the gods could do. His failure to resist the urge to look back at Eurydice was the moment that solidified the finality of death in Greek thought. It was as though the gods themselves were bound by the laws of nature, even if they were moved by Orpheus's music. Death was the ultimate boundary, one that could not be easily crossed, even with the most divine music. In the aftermath of Orpheus' death, his place in the afterlife also serves to reinforce the Greek belief in the power of the gods over the mortal realm. Orpheus was granted a kind of immortality, not through resurrection, but through the lasting power of his music. His lyre was placed among the stars as a constellation, symbolizing the eternity of his song and his enduring connection to the divine. This act of placing his lyre in the heavens can be seen as a way of honoring Orpheus's unique position between life and death, a figure whose music could bridge the gap between the mortal and the divine, the living and the dead. Orpheus's eternal presence in the stars serves as a reminder of the connection between love and loss, between life and death. His music, now immortalized in the constellations, transcends the boundaries of the earthly realm. It becomes a symbol of the enduring power of art, of the eternal nature of the soul, and of the undying love that he shared with Eurydice. In death, Orpheus continues to sing, his melody carrying through the heavens, reminding all who listen that love, though it may be lost, never truly disappears. It lingers on in the music, in the stars, in the hearts of those who continue to remember. The story of Orpheus, though born in the ancient world, has continued to inspire countless generations of artists, writers, and musicians. His legacy, marked by the intersection of love, loss, and music, transcends the boundaries of time, culture, and artistic medium. Orpheus's journey to the underworld and his tragic loss of Eurydice became one of the most enduring stories in Western literature and has been retold, reimagined, and reinterpreted in a multitude of ways throughout history. In literature, Orpheus's tale has served as both a subject of artistic exploration and a symbolic representation of human desires and limitations. From the ancient poets to the romantic writers of the 18th and 19th centuries, Orpheus's myth has been used as a metaphor for the power of art to transform the world, as well as for the inevitable sadness and longing that comes with the creative act. Orpheus's quest to reclaim Eurydice is more than just a love story. It's a tale of artistic ambition and the struggle between the ideal and the real, between the desire to create and the limitations that come with being human. In the works of poets like Ovid, whose metamorphoses immortalize the story of Orpheus, the myth is presented as an exploration of the emotional and spiritual power of music. Ovid's Orpheus is a figure of profound loss, whose ability to move the natural world with his song is ultimately futile in the face of death. This tragic irony has resonated deeply with readers throughout history, reinforcing the idea that the beauty of art and love can never fully overcome the harsh realities of life and death. In modern literature, Orpheus has continued to be a powerful symbol for the creative artist. In works like Rainer Maria Rilke's Orpheus, Eurydice, Hermes, the myth is explored not only as a personal tragedy, but also as a commentary on the artist's relationship to the world around them. For Rilke, Orpheus is not just a lover, but also a creator, whose journey into the underworld represents the artist's pursuit of meaning, even in the face of inevitable loss. His tragic failure to return with Eurydice is a reminder of the limits of artistic expression, the tension between what art can achieve and the reality it cannot transcend. The symbolism of Orpheus's story has also found resonance in the world of music itself. Throughout history, composers have turned to the myth as both a subject of their work and as an expression of the deep emotional connections that music can evoke. From the earliest operas to contemporary symphonic compositions, Orpheus's music has been used as a metaphor for the power of music to heal, to soothe, and to reach into the deepest corners of the human soul. One of the most notable works inspired by Orpheus's myth is Christoph Willibald Gluck's opera Orfeo ed Euridice, first performed in 1762. In this opera, Orpheus embarks on his famous journey to the underworld, using the power of his music to persuade the gods to return Eurydice to him. The opera is a stunning example of how Orpheus's music, in the hands of a skilled composer, becomes not just a vehicle for narrative, but also an expression of the emotional complexity of love and loss. Gluck's opera emphasizes the beauty and fragility of Orpheus's quest, using music to mirror the emotional highs and lows of his journey. The final tragic moment, when Orpheus turns to look at Eurydice, is rendered in music so poignantly that it captures the essence of the myth's sorrow and inevitability. Another example of Orpheus's influence in music is in the work of composers like Jean-Baptiste Lully and Claudio Monteverdi, who used the myth in operatic forms to explore the depths of human emotion. Monteverdi's L'Orfeo, 1607, is one of the earliest operas to center around Orpheus's myth, and it remains one of the most significant examples of how the story has inspired composers to explore the intersection of music and narrative. Through the richness of its orchestration and vocal parts, L'Orfeo reflects Orpheus's capacity to move and influence the world through his art. Music in these operatic works becomes a character in itself, capable of shaping reality and evoking both divine and human responses. In more recent times, Orpheus continues to inspire contemporary musicians and composers across genres. The myth's exploration of the transformative power of art resonates with musicians of all kinds, from classical to modern pop culture. The concept of Orpheus as a figure who uses music to communicate across the realms of life and death has found new forms in the modern age, where music still acts as a bridge between the earthly and the divine, the living and the lost. His music is often used in modern soundtracks as composers seek to evoke emotions of loss, longing, and the impossibility of reunion, much like Orpheus's original tale. Orpheus also plays a crucial role in the development of the concept of the artist in modern Western thought. His story speaks to the paradox of artistic creation. The artist is both a creator and a mourner, creating beauty from grief, but also doomed to witness the impermanence of that beauty. The struggle between the artist's desire for perfection and the inescapable limitations of life and death remains a core theme in the lives of creative individuals. Orpheus' failure to bring Eurydice back is symbolic of the artist's struggle with the limitations of their art. No matter how beautiful the creation, the artist can never fully transcend the boundaries of mortality. Through music, poetry, and art, Orpheus's legacy continues to evolve. His story lives on in the songs of the heartbroken, the melodies of those who seek redemption, and in the enduring belief that art has the power to touch the divine. While Orpheus may have failed to retrieve Eurydice, his music, his love, and his story continue to echo through the ages, inspiring those who listen to the eternal song of the human condition, one of love, loss, and the search for beauty in the face of impermanence. Orpheus's lyre is not just an instrument in the traditional sense. It is a symbol of the divine connection between music, love, and the human soul. In Greek mythology, the lyre was associated with Apollo, the god of music, and it was said to be crafted by the god himself. However, Orpheus's lyre transcends this connection, taking on a significance that speaks to the very nature of artistic creation and the transformative power of music. The lyre, in Orpheus's hands, became more than just a tool for making music. It became an extension of his soul, a channel through which he could express his deepest emotions and communicate with the gods, nature, and the very fabric of the world itself. The instrument was integral to Orpheus's identity as a musician, and it is through the lyre that he was able to bridge the gap between the realms of the living and the dead. The lyre allowed him to bring his grief and his love into the world, and it gave him the power to move all things, whether they be gods, humans, or animals. In the context of Orpheus's myth, the lyre represents the harmony between the divine and the human. The instrument itself, often depicted with golden strings, symbolizes both the celestial order and the human capacity for creativity. Just as the gods themselves are capable of creating order and beauty in the world, so too does Orpheus. Through his music, create a world of harmony and meaning from the chaos of his sorrow. His lyre is the vehicle for this creation, the means by which he can channel the divine energy that flows through him and connect it to the world around him. The lyre is also a symbol of balance and unity. In ancient Greek philosophy, music was believed to embody the perfect balance of rhythm and melody, representing the unity of the cosmos. In this sense, the lyre's ability to create harmonious music reflects the Greek belief in the interconnectedness of all things. Just as the strings of the lyre work together to produce a single unified sound, so too do the forces of love, loss, and grief work together in Orpheus's soul to create a story of profound beauty. Through the lyre, Orpheus is able to harmonize the disparate parts of his experience, the joy of his love for Eurydice and the sorrow of losing her, into a cohesive expression of human emotion. Orpheus's lyre is also a symbol of the artist's journey, one that is both deeply personal and profoundly universal. The instrument allows Orpheus to express his grief, but it also gives him the power to transcend that grief. Music, like the act of creation itself, is an act of transformation. Just as Orpheus uses his lyre to transform his sorrow into music, so too does art transform the artist's personal experiences into something that can be shared with others. The act of creating music or art is, in itself, a way of making sense of the world and giving meaning to human suffering. Orpheus, through his lyre, becomes a symbol of the artist who transforms pain into beauty, grief into song, and loss into something eternal. The lyre's role in Orpheus's myth also underscores the idea of the impermanence of life. Despite the beauty that Orpheus's music brings into the world, he is still subject to the forces of fate and the limitations of mortal existence. The moment when Orpheus turns to look at Eurydice, breaking the rules set by the gods, marks the tragic conclusion of his journey. No matter how powerful his music is, it cannot undo the laws of life and death. The lyre, in this sense, serves as a reminder that while music and art can bring comfort, transcend pain, and offer meaning, they cannot change the fundamental truths of existence. Yet, even in his failure, Orpheus's lyre continues to carry his legacy forward. After his death, when his body is dismembered by the Maenads, it is his lyre that is immortalized. The gods place it in the sky as a constellation, forever preserving Orpheus's music in the heavens. This final act of immortality speaks to the enduring power of art. Though Orpheus is gone, his music, his lyre, remains. The lyre, now a star in the sky, continues to echo the themes of his life: love, loss, beauty, and the desire to transcend the limitations of mortality. The symbol of the lyre also serves as a metaphor for the power of art to transcend the boundaries of time and space. Orpheus, through his music, reaches beyond his mortal life, his song carried through the ages. The lyre, like all great art, becomes a bridge between the past and the present, between the living and the dead, and between the human and the divine. It speaks to the idea that while individuals may pass away, their creations, whether they be music, art, or literature, can live on, continuing to touch the hearts and minds of those who come after them. In this way, the lyre becomes a symbol of the eternal nature of art and the human desire to leave behind something of lasting value. Orpheus, through his music, has created something that cannot be taken away, something that will resonate through the cosmos long after his death. His lyre, placed among the stars, remains a testament to the power of love, the beauty of music, and the enduring legacy of those who, through their art, reach out to touch the divine. Orpheus's music is perhaps one of the most enduring symbols in all of Greek mythology, transcending mere art and becoming a language of its own. His lyre, through which he expressed the deepest of human emotions, was not just a means of communication. It was a way of connecting to something universal, something far greater than any one individual or culture. Orpheus's ability to charm both gods and animals, to move trees and rivers, and to bring even the most inanimate objects to life with his music, speaks to the power of art to unite all things, to speak a language that transcends words and barriers. Music, in Orpheus's world, was not just an expression of emotion. It was a language that spoke directly to the soul. It was an elemental force, a universal bond that connected the living and the dead, the gods and mortals. His ability to communicate through music represented the ultimate form of expression, one that went beyond mere sound and reached into the very fabric of existence. Orpheus's music was so powerful that it could transcend language itself. Where words failed, music succeeded. In Greek mythology, the gods themselves were often depicted as patrons of music, from Apollo, the god of music, to the Muses, who inspired poets and artists. Orpheus, as the son of Apollo and Calliope, embodied this divine connection to music. Yet, his talent was not limited to the divine realm. It was deeply human, resonating with the emotions and experiences of all living beings. His music bridged the gap between gods and men, nature and civilization, life and death. Orpheus, through his art, spoke a language that could be understood by anyone, regardless of their origins, status, or even their ability to understand words. When Orpheus played his lyre, the natural world itself responded. Animals gathered around him, entranced by his melodies. Trees seemed to sway to his music, their branches moving as though alive with the rhythms of his song. The river gods, touched by his sound, calmed their turbulent waters. Even in the underworld, Orpheus's music had the power to move the hearts of the gods, softening the usually unyielding nature of Hades and Persephone. His music was a language that spoke directly to the heart of creation, a universal language that reached beyond the limits of human understanding. The ability of Orpheus's music to communicate with all living things suggests a profound truth about the nature of art itself. Art speaks to the innermost aspects of the human experience, bypassing logic and reason to connect directly with emotion. In his music, Orpheus was able to express not only his own grief, but also the universal experiences of love, loss, longing, and hope. His ability to communicate these emotions through music made him a symbol of the artist as a vessel for the collective emotional experience of humanity. In this way, Orpheus's music becomes a symbol of art's power to transcend the individual and become something collective. His music was not for him alone. It was for the world, for all those who could hear it and feel its resonance. Even the gods who existed beyond the human experience were moved by his songs. The music that flowed from Orpheus's lyre was not bound by any one culture, language, or time. It was a language that spoke directly to the soul, a language that would continue to resonate across generations and across boundaries. Orpheus's ability to move through the boundaries of life and death is perhaps the most profound way his music speaks as a universal language. His journey into the underworld to retrieve Eurydice is symbolic of the artist's quest to reach beyond the material world and into the unknown, the unseen, and the eternal. Through his music, Orpheus is able to cross the divide between the living and the dead, to communicate with the spirits, and to plead for the return of his lost love. The underworld, a place of silence and finality, is no match for the power of his music, which reverberates even through the darkness and the silence of death. This connection between Orpheus and the underworld reveals that music, as a universal language, is not just a means of communication for the living. It also has the power to transcend death. Orpheus' music becomes a bridge between the realms, a language that speaks across the divide between life and death. His love for Eurydice is so profound that it compels him to challenge the boundaries of the mortal world, to use his art to reach into the very heart of the afterlife. His music, in this sense, becomes a force of transformation, capable of altering the very nature of existence. Yet, as Orpheus's story tragically reveals, even the most powerful music cannot escape the laws of nature. When Orpheus turns to look at Eurydice before reaching the surface, he breaks the one rule set by the gods. The price for his momentary lapse in faith is the irreversible loss of his love. This moment serves as a reminder of the limits of art, the limits of even the most powerful and universal forms of expression. No matter how beautiful or poignant Orpheus's music is, it cannot undo the fundamental laws of existence. Despite this, Orpheus's legacy endures. His music, though it could not bring back Eurydice, continues to resonate in the hearts of those who hear it. His story and the universal truths it embodies are passed down through generations. Orpheus becomes more than just a mythological figure. He becomes a symbol of the power of art to transcend time, to connect across boundaries, and to speak the universal language of the soul. In the end, Orpheus's music is a testament to the human desire to express the inexpressible, to communicate the deepest emotions and the most profound truths through the power of art. It is a reminder that music, like all art, is a language that speaks directly to the heart, bypassing logic and reason to touch the essence of our shared human experience. Orpheus's music continues to speak to us across the ages, reminding us of the beauty and the tragedy of life, love, and loss. Orpheus's story is not only one of love and loss, but also one of profound sacrifice. His journey to the underworld to bring Eurydice back to life represents the artist's eternal struggle, dedicating oneself fully to art at the cost of personal well-being, relationships, and even life itself. In this sense, Orpheus becomes a symbol of the sacrifices that artists often make in their pursuit of beauty, meaning, and expression. His tale serves as a reminder that the path of the artist is not always one of joy and triumph, but often one of pain, rejection, and the inability to fully reconcile the world of the living with the aspirations of the soul. The act of Orpheus descending into the underworld is symbolic of the artist's journey into the depths of their own soul, confronting the shadows and the suffering that often accompany creative expression. To create is to dive into the unknown, to risk exposing oneself fully to the darkest corners of the human experience. Just as Orpheus, through his music, sought to bridge the gap between life and death, artists seek to bridge the gap between their inner world and the external world, using their craft to communicate what cannot be easily said in words. Orpheus's willingness to journey into the underworld to retrieve Eurydice is a reflection of the artist's pursuit of perfection or resolution. Artists, much like Orpheus, are often driven by an intense love for their craft, a love that can sometimes blur the boundaries between personal desires and the work itself. Orpheus's quest is not just about reclaiming his lost love. It is about his inability to accept that which has been lost, about the artist's need to reach beyond the limitations of reality to create something that transcends time and death. However, Orpheus's tragic failure, his inability to resist looking back at Eurydice, is also symbolic of the tension between artistic ambition and the constraints of the real world. It represents the inevitable disappointment that comes when an artist's deep emotional connection to their work or vision conflicts with the limitations imposed by the external world, whether those limitations are personal, physical, or spiritual. The act of looking back, in this sense, symbolizes the artist's desire to hold on to the past, to revisit the ideal, to capture something that is fleeting. But just as Orpheus cannot undo his mistake, artists often find that their work is never fully completed, their vision never entirely realized. The journey toward artistic fulfillment is often one of sacrifice, of living with the tension between what one can create and what one cannot. The moment of Orpheus's failure in the underworld, when he turns to look at Eurydice and loses her forever, mirrors the frustration that artists often feel in their pursuit of perfection. No matter how hard they try, no matter how much they sacrifice, there are always elements of their work that escape them. This can lead to a sense of futility, a recognition that the ideal, the perfect creation, the purest expression of one's love and intention is often beyond reach. The artist, like Orpheus, is left to deal with the loss of their vision, the inability to fully capture the beauty or truth they sought. Yet, despite this failure, Orpheus's legacy endures. His music continues to resonate, his story continues to be told, and his sacrifice continues to inspire. In this way, Orpheus represents the artist, who, though often misunderstood or even rejected during their lifetime, leaves behind something of lasting value. The fruits of artistic sacrifice may not always be immediately recognized or appreciated, but they live on through the work itself, through the art that continues to speak to generations long after the artist's death. Orpheus's song becomes a timeless echo that transcends the pain of his loss, a reminder that the value of artistic sacrifice lies not in the immediate reward, but in the lasting impact it has on the world. The final symbol of Orpheus's sacrifice is the placement of his lyre in the stars. His music, though no longer heard on earth, is immortalized in the heavens, serving as a reminder of the beauty and pain that comes with the artist's journey. The lyre, placed among the stars, becomes a beacon for all who follow in the footsteps of Orpheus, artists who seek to express the inexpressible to bring something from the depths of their soul into the world, even at great personal cost. Orpheus's tragic end highlights the dual nature of the artist's path, the beauty of creation and the pain of separation from the ideal. His death represents the ultimate sacrifice, the artist's willingness to give everything, heart, soul, and body, to the pursuit of art. The artist's relationship with their work is often one of sacrifice, a willingness to endure loss and pain in order to create something that transcends their own existence. Through Orpheus, we learn that artistic sacrifice is not just about the work itself, but also about the artist's relationship to the world. The artist, like Orpheus, must live with the tension between creation and loss, between the pursuit of the ideal and the acceptance of the limits of the human condition. But in this struggle, something beautiful is born, something that endures, something that continues to touch the hearts and minds of those who come after. Fate, a central theme in Greek mythology, is perhaps most poignantly explored in the story of Orpheus. His journey to the underworld to retrieve Eurydice is not just a tale of love and loss, but also a profound meditation on the role that fate plays in the lives of mortals. No matter how beautiful or powerful Orpheus's music, no matter how deeply he loved Eurydice, he was ultimately bound by the unyielding forces of fate that governed both mortal lives and the gods' actions. Orpheus, in many ways, represents the human desire to defy fate. His love for Eurydice is so strong that he is willing to journey into the very heart of death itself to bring her back. He defies the natural order, believing that his music and his devotion can alter the course of destiny. But in doing so, he learns the hard truth. Even the most divine of gifts, the power of music, the purest of love, cannot change the inevitability of fate. In Greek mythology, fate is often depicted as an immutable force, one that cannot be escaped or altered no matter how hard a mortal may try. The Moirai, or Fates, were the goddesses who controlled the threads of life for every individual, spinning, measuring, and cutting the thread of life. In Orpheus's case, the Fates had already determined his path. His love for Eurydice, his journey to the underworld, and even his tragic mistake of turning back were all part of the tapestry of his life, woven by forces beyond his control. Orpheus's attempt to defy fate by turning back to look at Eurydice is symbolic of the human tendency to seek control over the uncontrollable. His failure to resist the temptation to gaze at her represents the fragility of human will against the overwhelming power of fate. It is a moment of profound irony. The very act that Orpheus believes will reunite him with Eurydice is the one that seals her loss forever. This paradox reflects the core of Greek mythology's treatment of fate. The more one attempts to challenge it, the more inevitable its consequences become. In Orpheus's case, the consequences of his actions are tragic. By breaking the rule that the gods set, he not only loses Eurydice forever, but also becomes a symbol of the futility of human defiance against fate. His music, which had once been capable of charming the gods and taming the wildest beasts, cannot prevent him from succumbing to the inevitability of his fate. This underscores the Greek belief that while mortals can act with great passion and intent, they are ultimately subject to the whims of the gods and the laws of fate. Yet, within this story lies a deeper understanding of fate's role in the human experience. Orpheus, though he fails to change his fate, is still able to leave behind a legacy of profound beauty. His music, though unable to alter the course of events, transcends time and space, offering a lasting symbol of love, grief, and the enduring power of art. In this way, Orpheus's fate is not simply one of loss. It is also a reminder that while fate cannot be controlled, the way in which one meets their fate can be transformative. Orpheus's response to his fate, his ability to channel his grief into music, gives his life meaning, even in the face of inevitable loss. Orpheus's tale also speaks to the broader theme of the human struggle with fate. His desire to reclaim Eurydice can be seen as a reflection of the human desire to conquer the inevitable, to hold on to what is fleeting, and to defy the forces that shape life. But his failure, his moment of turning back, reminds us that while love and devotion are powerful, there are forces beyond our comprehension that govern our lives. Fate, in the Greek sense, is a reminder that human life is fragile and that the journey we take is not always ours to control. However, Orpheus's legacy shows that even in the face of fate's cruelty, beauty can emerge. His music, though it could not save Eurydice, continues to resonate across the generations. It is as though fate itself has recognized Orpheus's sacrifice, immortalizing him through the stars. The gods may have decreed his fate, but through his art, Orpheus has transcended it. His story becomes a testament to the idea that while we may not control our fate, the impact we have through our actions and creations, through our love, our music, and our art, can defy the limits of time and mortality. Orpheus's journey and the eventual loss of Eurydice serve as a reminder of the Greek understanding of fate's role in human life. That we may be powerless to change certain aspects of our destiny, but in the way we respond to those circumstances, in the way we love, grieve, and create, we can find meaning and purpose. Orpheus's music, born of both love and loss, becomes the vehicle through which he, despite his failure, continues to speak to the world. His fate may have been sealed, but his music, the manifestation of his soul, becomes something that outlasts him, a legacy that defies the passage of time. In many ways, Orpheus's story encapsulates the Greek paradox of fate. That while fate governs the lives of mortals, the human spirit, through its capacity for art, love, and creation, can transcend it. The cycle of life, death, and rebirth continues through Orpheus's music, proving that even in the face of seemingly insurmountable loss, there is beauty to be found and a lasting impact to be made. One of the most compelling aspects of Orpheus's story is his unyielding pursuit of harmony, both in his music and in his life. His music, which could tame wild beasts, calm storms, and even charm the gods, represents an ideal, a perfect balance of the elements, emotions, and the world around him. Orpheus was a figure who sought not just to express his emotions, but to create a perfect unity between himself, nature, and the divine. His journey, both literal and figurative, is a quest for this harmony, an attempt to reconcile the human with the divine, the mortal with the eternal. The idea of harmony in the context of Orpheus's myth goes beyond mere music. It speaks to a philosophical ideal held by the ancient Greeks, that the universe, in its truest form, operates in perfect balance, where every note, every movement, and every life plays its part in a larger cosmic symphony. For Orpheus, music was not just a form of personal expression. It was the language of the cosmos itself, the thread that connected all things. Through his art, he sought to achieve a deep understanding of this cosmic order, to become one with the forces that shaped the world around him. But Orpheus's pursuit of harmony also speaks to the inherent human desire for unity and peace. His music, especially in the aftermath of his loss of Eurydice, becomes a vehicle for coping with grief and pain. The very act of making music allowed him to express the inexpressible, to take the chaos of his emotions and transform them into something beautiful. Music, in this sense, becomes a healing force, a way of finding balance in a world that can often feel out of control. Yet, as Orpheus's story demonstrates, the pursuit of harmony is not always a simple or straightforward path. His failure to bring Eurydice back from the underworld, a tragedy caused by his inability to resist the impulse to look back at her, highlights the conflict between idealism and reality. The rule that he must not look back, set by the gods themselves, represents the natural order, a law that Orpheus, in his deep desire for reconciliation, cannot fully accept. In that single moment of doubt and longing, Orpheus's pursuit of harmony falls apart, and the consequences of his actions become irreversible. The moment of Orpheus's failure is a reminder that the pursuit of harmony, while noble and beautiful, is fraught with challenges. It is not always possible to reconcile all things, and sometimes the very act of striving for perfection can lead to unintended consequences. Orpheus's mistake is one that reflects the human condition, the desire to hold on to what is fleeting, to revisit the past, and to fix what has already been lost. His inability to accept the limitations of fate and to trust in the rules that govern life and death ultimately costs him his greatest desire. This tension between idealism and reality, between the pursuit of harmony and the acceptance of imperfection, is one of the central themes of Orpheus's myth. His story reflects the paradox that lies at the heart of the human experience. The desire for perfect love, perfect connection, and perfect understanding, set against the reality that such perfection is often unattainable. In this way, Orpheus becomes a symbol not only of the artist, but of every individual who seeks meaning and harmony in a world that is, by its very nature, imperfect. Even in the face of this imperfection, however, Orpheus's pursuit of harmony is not in vain. His music, though unable to prevent his tragedy, continues to resonate throughout the ages. The beauty of his songs, the emotional depth of his expression, and the power of his art endure long after his death. Through his music, Orpheus becomes immortal, not because he succeeded in his quest for perfection, but because he dared to pursue it. His failure, in this sense, becomes a part of the larger story of the human struggle for meaning, for connection, and for harmony in a world that is often divided and chaotic. The legacy of Orpheus is also a testament to the power of art to transform pain into beauty. Despite the tragic nature of his journey, Orpheus's music continues to inspire. It becomes a symbol of the enduring quest for meaning, the search for harmony that defines the human spirit. Through his art, Orpheus has left behind something that transcends his own life and death, a legacy of love, loss, and the unrelenting pursuit of beauty in the face of imperfection. Orpheus's story reminds us that harmony is not something that can be easily achieved, nor is it something that can be fully controlled. The pursuit of harmony is a lifelong journey, one that requires both patience and acceptance. It is about learning to live with imperfection, to find balance amidst the chaos, and to recognize that even in failure there is beauty. Orpheus, with all his gifts and all his flaws, remains a powerful symbol of this pursuit. His music, His love and his story continue to echo through time, reminding us of the universal desire to create harmony in a world that is forever changing. Orpheus's death marked the end of his physical presence on earth, but it did not signify the end of his influence. Through his music, he achieved a form of immortality, one not bound by the constraints of time or space. Orpheus's song transcended the realms of the living and the dead, resonating across generations and across the boundaries of life and death. His lyre, placed among the stars as a constellation, became a permanent fixture in the sky, a symbol of his eternal legacy. Though Orpheus's body was destroyed, his song continued to echo through the cosmos, a reminder that art, like love, can never truly be extinguished. Orpheus's immortality, however, is not simply symbolic. It is a testament to the power of music and art to transcend the limitations of the human experience. Music, in Orpheus's case, was not merely a form of entertainment or expression. It was a powerful force that could alter reality itself, bridging the realms of life and death, of gods and mortals. His song, once heard, could never be forgotten. It became a part of the very fabric of the world, carried forward through the hearts of those who had heard it, and through the stories that would be told in his memory. His music, though silent on earth after his death, continued to shape the world around him. The animals, the trees, and even the gods who had once been moved by his melodies carried the echoes of his song long after his body was gone. His music was a force that lived on in the hearts of all who had listened to it, a force that could never be fully extinguished. It was, in a sense, immortal, not because it could be heard with the ears, but because it had become a part of the very soul of the world. In the stories that followed, Orpheus continued to serve as a symbol of the power of art to transcend the mortal condition. His music was the perfect embodiment of the Greek ideal of arete, the pursuit of excellence in all things. Orpheus, through his music, achieved a level of artistic greatness that made him immortal in the hearts of those who heard him. His song, though tragic, became a reminder that art is one of the few things that can outlast the ravages of time. Even as the world changes, the song of Orpheus remains constant, a thread woven through the tapestry of human history. In the centuries that followed, Orpheus became a central figure in both art and literature. His story was retold in countless forms, from the tragic Greek plays to the works of the Renaissance and beyond. Each retelling of his story added to the layers of meaning surrounding his life and death. Through these stories, Orpheus became not just a figure of Greek mythology, but a universal symbol of the artist's struggle, the tension between love and loss, creation and destruction, life and death. The enduring power of Orpheus's song is also reflected in the way it has continued to inspire modern musicians, poets, and artists. His music, though never heard in its original form, has been reimagined in countless ways throughout history. From operas to symphonies, from poems to contemporary songs. Orpheus's myth has been used as a canvas for artists to explore the eternal themes of love, loss, and the search for meaning. His song, in all its forms, continues to reverberate through the ages, connecting those who create to the universal human experience. Orpheus's legacy as a symbol of artistic immortality also speaks to the human desire to leave behind something lasting, something that will outlive the individual and continue to inspire future generations. Through his music, Orpheus achieved something greater than mere fame or recognition. He achieved a form of eternal life, not through the body, but through the art he created. His story reminds us that the power of art lies not just in its ability to capture a moment in time, but in its ability to transcend that moment, to continue to speak to people long after the artist has gone. In the Greek conception of the afterlife, the soul was believed to continue its existence in a shadowy realm, separated from the world of the living. However, Orpheus's immortality was different. It was not a continuation of his soul in the afterlife, but a continuation of his song. The lyre, placed among the stars, became a symbol of the eternal nature of his music. Though Orpheus's soul had passed beyond the reach of mortal understanding, his music remained a part of the universe, a constant, unchanging presence in the sky. In this way, Orpheus's immortality reflects the belief that art, once created, cannot truly be destroyed. It remains resonating through the ages, connecting the living with the dead, the past with the present. Orpheus's song, like the stars in the sky, continues to shine brightly, a beacon for all who seek to connect with the divine through art. His music, born of love and loss, serves as a reminder that while life may be fleeting, the impact of our creations can be eternal. Through his art, Orpheus reached beyond the limitations of the human experience, becoming a figure whose legacy continues to inspire and connect generations of artists, lovers, and dreamers. Orpheus's death, while tragic, did not mark the end of his influence on the world. His legacy, forged through his music and the profound emotional impact of his story, continued to resonate long after his life had ended. The final resting place of Orpheus is one that speaks to his eternal connection to both the mortal world and the divine. Even in death, Orpheus's spirit lived on, symbolized by the stars, by the constellation that bears his lyre, and by the powerful ripples his music left across history. The location of Orpheus's death, surrounded by the Maenads who tore his body apart, is significant not only for its violence, but also for the way it symbolizes the tension between Orpheus's pursuit of harmony and the forces of chaos. The Maenads, followers of Dionysus, represent the primal, uncontrollable aspects of existence, in stark contrast to Orpheus's ordered, harmonious music. This violent end, one marked by frenzied passion and destruction, encapsulates the tragic irony of Orpheus's life. Despite his ability to create order and beauty through his art, he could not escape the chaotic forces of nature and fate. However, even in his dismemberment, there is a form of transcendence. His body, though torn apart, is still preserved in the stars. The gods, moved by Orpheus's undying love for Eurydice and the power of his music, placed his lyre in the heavens as a constellation, allowing his essence to shine forever. This final act of immortality represents the Greek belief that while the body may decay, the soul, through art, can achieve a form of eternal life. The lyre, a symbol of Orpheus's creative spirit, became a beacon in the night sky, connecting his life, his music, and his story to the universe itself. The stars, which the ancient Greeks saw as both divine and eternal, became a place where Orpheus's legacy would continue to shine brightly. The constellation of Orpheus's lyre would forever remind future generations of his music's power and the depth of his journey. In this way, Orpheus's resting place was not a tomb, but a place where his music, his love, and his story could continue to reach those who looked up at the night sky. Orpheus's story is one that endures, not because of the physical remains of the man himself, but because of the resonance of his music, which continues to echo across time. Through literature, art and music, Orpheus has remained an icon, a symbol of the eternal struggle between love and loss, order and chaos, life and death. His tale has inspired countless works of art, from ancient Greek tragedies to modern adaptations, and has influenced poets, composers, and visual artists alike. Orpheus has become, in many ways, the archetypal artist, the creator who uses his art to transcend the limitations of the human condition, even as he struggles with the inescapable forces of fate. In the realm of music, Orpheus's influence is particularly profound. His ability to use music to connect with both the natural world and the divine has served as a model for many composers throughout history. From the early operas that depicted his descent into the underworld to modern symphonic works, Orpheus has remained as symbols of the transformative power of music. His music, though it could not save Eurydice, continues to inspire those who hear it. Like Orpheus, musicians and composers throughout history have used their art to explore the depths of human emotion, to connect with the divine, and to express the inexpressible. Orpheus's legacy, in this sense, lives on through the work of countless artists who seek to communicate something beyond the boundaries of the mortal world. Orpheus's influence is also felt in the world of literature, where his story continues to be a rich source of inspiration for writers exploring themes of love, loss, and the search for meaning. In works ranging from classical poetry to modern novels, Orpheus' tale is reimagined and retold, offering new insights into the human condition. Writers, like composers, have used Orpheus as a figure who embodies the paradox of the artist, someone who is both deeply connected to the world through their art and yet distanced from it by the very act of creation. The symbolism of Orpheus's music, his tragic journey, and his ultimate transcendence through the stars continues to resonate with people from all walks of life. Orpheus represents the artist's eternal struggle, the desire to create something beautiful, to capture the essence of love and loss, and to make sense of the world through art. His music, like all great art, becomes a vessel for the emotions, the struggles, and the triumphs of the human spirit. As Orpheus's song continues to echo through the ages, it serves as a reminder that art is not bound by time, space, or death. Orpheus, in his music, has created something that continues to speak to those who listen, offering solace, inspiration, and beauty. His legacy, immortalized in the stars, reminds us that while life is fleeting, the impact of art can be eternal. Through his music, Orpheus lives on, his story a constant, enduring presence in the fabric of human experience. As we reflect on the life of Orpheus, we are reminded of the powerful, transformative nature of art and the eternal struggle between love, loss, and the pursuit of beauty. Orpheus's story, though tragic, is ultimately one of transcendence. The way his music, born from the depths of grief, continues to echo through the ages, touching the hearts and minds of all who hear it. His legacy is not just a story of a man who failed to defy death, but a reminder that through art we can reach beyond ourselves, connecting to something greater than the limitations of our mortal lives. Orpheus, through his music, bridged the gap between life and death, the divine and the mortal, reminding us that while the forces of fate may be beyond our control, the creations of the heart and soul have the power to live on. His lyre, now placed among the stars, is a symbol of the enduring power of art. The way it transcends time, connects generations, and immortalizes the emotions and experiences that define us all. In his music, Orpheus found a way to express the inexpressible, to transform pain into beauty, and to leave a legacy that continues to inspire and heal. His story, though filled with sorrow, is also filled with hope. The hope that even in the face of loss, there is beauty to be found, and that the love we create and share can never truly be erased. As we look up at the stars, let us remember the song of Orpheus, and let it serve as a reminder that the power of art, of music, and of love is eternal. It may take different forms and be experienced in different ways, but like Orpheus's lyre, it continues to resonate, offering a connection to the divine and to one another that will never fade. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the life and legacy of Orpheus. May his song continue to inspire and remind us all of the beauty that exists in both creation and in the quiet moments of our lives.